On July 4, 2009, several faculty members from the finance department at Chinese University gathered to work extra hours at the university, managing and tracking the school's finances and expenses from the previous semester. 43-year-old faculty member Tan Chenghui was expected to be present, but he was nowhere to be seen. A person named Ma called Chenghui's mobile phone at 11 a.m., but there was no answer. Ma, overwhelmed by the workload, initially wasn't concerned, as he assumed Chenghui was with his family's stray dog, which had a skin disease. Chenghui had planned to take the dog to the vet, so Ma thought that's where he might be. On July 5th, the university's finance department held its work meeting, but Chengdue failed to show up for a second time. Ma once again called his mobile phone and once again was met with no answer. Ma, unfortunately, didn't know his landline phone, so he couldn't call that. On July 6th, it had been 2 days of Ma not showing up to work nor having any contact with his co-workers. Eventually, one of his co-workers reported the situation to the university's finance department. Chenghui's superiors did know his house's landline phone, so they called that number, but just like his cell phone, no one picked up. They then called the library where his 33-year-old wife Tang and worked at. According to the library staff, she was absent from work too and didn't book any days off. The couple were from Zhongshan in mainland China's Guangdong province and were married for 11 years. 11 years prior, gave birth to their eldest daughter 10-year-old Tan Xiao, and later their youngest daughter 7-year-old Tan Xiaoyang. Although their living conditions and financial situation were not great, and they lived in an abandoned recycling station on Wuzhou South Road, they were described as kind, happy, cheerful, and upbeat people, with their children being well-behaved. Chenghui was known to take his daughters into town to have fun, so many may have thought that the family opted to take a vacation to spend time together. But something came up which stopped them from returning. His colleagues spent the next while repeatedly calling his mobile and house phone in hopes that something different would happen. Eventually, someone finally answered, but rather than being a member of the family, it was a strange, unfamiliar man who sounded middle-aged. The man claimed to be Chenghui's cousin and that the family had gone to Dongduan in the mainland's Guangdong province for summer vacation, and that Chenghui had gifted him his personal phone for safekeeping. He said he didn't know when the family would return to Hong Kong, and after repeated questions, he hung up and turned the mobile phone off. The only thing this call succeeded in doing was making Chenghui's co-workers even more suspicious and worried. Chenghui was always diligent and measured, having never left work without reason, and if he were to go on a vacation with his children, he would have worked things out with their school first. The family also took care of 9 stray dogs, which left the question of who would be caring for them if they went away to the mainland and how they would afford their vacation to China. Chenghui also used to live with his parents, a father who was a sailor and his mother who worked at a paper mill. However, his father went missing without a trace and was never found, leading to his mother going ill, which left her in a nursing home. It was seen as drastically out of character for Chenghui to abandon her when they decided to call the police. One of Chenghui's colleagues led the police to Chenghui's home at the abandoned recycling station in Pingqi village. On the way there, a curious event had happened. They saw a short man from a distance from the fence of the Tan family and quickly disappearing from view. Initially, nothing was thought of this and they continued on. Once they reached the gate to their home, they found it locked. The police surveyed the property and questioned the neighbors. The abandoned recycling station covers an area of nearly 450 square meters. Its construction area is only 90 square meters, and nearly 350 square meters are empty flower beds. The building was also illegal. The original owner randomly built several tin houses on the foundation as a waste recycling site, and the stone house on the other side was used as a pig farm with almost no people living there. So the police only had one neighbor to question. An elderly woman named Wang, who lived alone across the street, said that she lived in the area for a long time. She knew their schedule and that, in the afternoon, they usually spent it tending to their garden. But aside from that, she didn't know too much about their personal lives. She said that due to the remote location, the family didn't have many relatives coming to visit. The only acquaintance of theirs that she knew of was Chenghui's middle-aged cousin, simply named Su. Wang didn't know much about suicide from overhearing and mentioning that Chenghui's uncle lived in a nearby stone house. Chang Hui's colleague told the police about his phone being answered by his cousin, with the police assuming that the man on the other end was Su. Wang didn't know Su's address or the address of this uncle, but she did hear cries of help from the house on July 5th, so the police mobilized several officers to conduct door-to-door inquiries in Pingqi village. Investigators later that same day managed to track the man down at a stone house at 74 Wuzhou Road. The man was 42-year-old Su Shenqi, and he confirmed that he was Cheng Hui's cousin. He said that he usually visited the family home to help renovate and work on the garden, and when asked about the contents of the phone call, he stood by his story that the family went to China for vacation. He said that on July 5th, Cheng Hui visited his mother at the nursing home before returning to the home and telling him that he planned on going to Dongguan, China for a few days. The roaming fee for bringing his Hong Kong mobile phone into the mainland would have been too expensive, so he asked him to hold onto it until he got back. And the person police and Chang Hui's colleague witnessed fleeing was actually Su leaving after feeding the family dogs. Chang Qi's body language and expressions were observed, and he didn't seem the least bit troubled, and there were seemingly no glaring inconsistencies with his story. They asked Chang Qi if he had a key to the family home, but he said he didn't. Even though they found Xinqi, the police continued their door-to-door inquiries. Some of the villagers told police that a few days earlier a stranger had borrowed money from a female villager in the village. They later had a heated exchange where she threatened that when Cheng Hui's mother was hospitalized, he also was in debt for her, and that she would go to their home to collect it if the stranger didn't pay. According to the other villagers, however, the stranger was not Shanqi. But even so, there was now speculation that the family could have gone into hiding to escape their debts and lied to their cousin, or so they thought. When the police asked the villagers about Shanqi, that is when they learned that he lied. The villagers confirmed that Shanqi regularly went to the area to maintain and work on the home, and that he was always able to open the gate and door on his own despite no one else being home. To the police, this meant that he must have had a key or access to the home. In fact, he did, because Wang witnessed Chang Hui hand the key to Shang. He left the key at the university office and asked Shang Yi to pick it up for him, and Wang witnessed this exchange. The police returned to Shang Yi's home and asked for the key. He again denied owning one and said that he used a spare key for renovations, which he returned and thus didn't have access to, as Shin Qi was far less collected compared to his last line of questioning. Shin Qi was also deliberately avoiding key details, so when the police threatened to search his home, Shin Qi became panicked and suddenly remembered that he had another house key that he didn't return. He retrieved the key from his dresser and gave it to the police. Despite his suspicious behavior, there was no direct evidence linking Shinqi to the disappearance of the family, so the police put him under surveillance while continuing the investigation while using the spare key to investigate the home. The inside of the home was a mess and clearly had been ransacked. Investigators also found several fresh bloodstains on the wall. Judging by the spread of the bloodstains, someone had likely been killed on the property. When police went to the kitchen, they found a sink full of dirty dishes, which poked more holes into the story that they went to China, as they would have left their house a mess before leaving. Inside the couple's master bedroom, the police discovered the family's ID cards in the dresser. The head investigator contacted the border crossing office, and according to them, the family never left Hong Kong. They continued to search the house and found a blood-stained shirt in a side room and a blood-stained plastic hollow water pipe in the corner. The police used sniffer dogs to dry and find more evidence, or maybe even the family themselves. The dogs picked up a scent and 9 meters away found bloodstains under freshly turned over soil. And lastly, even though it was summer vacation, the couple's daughters Zion and Zion had signed up for summer school, meaning they wouldn't be on vacation. It became obvious that the family had become victims of foul play, and soon a dedicated task force was established to investigate the case. As it turned out, though, no investigation actually needed to take place. The police, due to the late hours, simply cordoned off the scene and blocked the entrance and exit of Pingqi village to outsiders while placing Shang Qi under house arrest as the main suspect. Shang Qi quickly confessed. According to Shang Qi, he was from Haiyangpu in Guangdong province and usually lived with his sister, wife, and a 15-year-old and 16-year-old son who suffered from memory problems. He used to make a living from motorcycles in Zhongshan City, but in 2006, Guangdong's ban on motorcycles for obvious reasons led to a drop in sales and income. Due to his financial troubles, He contacted his cousin Tan Chengib in Hong Kong and asked if he could help find him some work in the city. Chang Yui managed to get Cheng He working at a construction job that paid a daily salary of 500 Hong Kong dollars, including board and lodging. After half a month of work, Cheng Yi wasn't satisfied with his salary, and due to company deductions, he was only getting 220 Hong Kong dollars. He quit his job without notice and returned to China in a fit of anger. In 2007, he moved back to Hong Kong due to the extensive damage that Typhoon Pabuk dealt to his home. The repairs would cost a lot of money, so he asked Cheng Hui to hook him up with employment in Hong Kong again. Cheng Hui was unable to find anywhere hiring, so he offered to pay Cheng Hui out of his own salary if he agreed to help work on his own home. Shang-Chi accepted this offer. So under this arrangement, every other month Shang-Chi would travel to Hong Kong to do work and odd jobs for the household, often tending to their garden and doing repairs to their home. Then, according to Shang-Chi, he and An Hui began to have an affair behind Cheng Hui's back, which was discovered by Cheng Hui. On July 3rd, Chang-Chi went to Hong Kong, and on July 5th took Cheng Hui to the nursing home to visit his mother. Chang Yi then snuck out of the nursing home to return home and continue his affair with Ani, only for Cheng Hui to unexpectedly return home early. A furious Cheng Hui charged toward him and tackled him with Chang Yi, saying he had murderous intent in his eyes. In desperation, he grabbed a 25 centimeters long fruit knife and stabbed Cheng Yong until he fell into a pool of blood dead. Annie was understandably terrified by what just happened and wanted to go to the police. Shanky said that he couldn't let that happen, and since he couldn't dissuade Annie, he decided to kill her too. He found some wires in the corner of the room and charged toward her, knocking her to the ground and tying her hands behind her back. She then covered her mouth and nose with tape and covered her head with a plastic bag. Before this happened, the couple's 2 children were in a bedroom watching cartoons. She screamed at them to run away, but instead ran towards their mother and saw their father dead and Shinchi in the process of killing their mother. They too ran into their room crying and locked the door. Since she was already tied up, Shang-Chi abandoned An Yi to head after them. The wails of Shaoan and Shaoan are what Huang heard. Picking up a pair of pliers, Shang-Chi pried open the door, and using some more wires, he did what he did to An Yi. He tied their hands behind their backs, taped over their mouth and nose, and put a plastic bag over their heads. Shang-Chi left their bedroom and returned to where he was prior to find that Anha finally stopped breathing. Shaoan and Xiaoyang both suffocated not long after. After killing the whole family, Shang-Chi was at a loss of what to do next. He turned to his home to think it over. He thought that hiding them in a ditch or body of water would be too easy to find, and that dismembering them would be too exhausting and time-consuming. So he settled on burying them on their own property. On July 6th, he returned to the home to try and clean up as many bloodstains as he could find. He then got to work on digging the hole. He dug a hole deep and wide enough to hold the family of 4 and quickly placed their bodies inside of it. He also disposed of the murder weapons in the pit before the hole back in. The police, while skeptical about his motive, did believe the rest of the story and brought Shang-Chi to the home, where he pointed to the area that held the sharp knife, a water pipe, a pair of iron pliers, and the other tools used for committing the crime. The police, on July 7th, called the fire department to help with unearthing the remains. The firefighters arrived with excavation tools and were also wearing gas masks as the bodies were buried near a septic tank. They began digging only to very quickly encounter a problem. They hit cement. Shang-Chi left one detail out in his confession, and that was how he filled the pit with cement before filling it back in. The firefighters were unable to estimate the thickness of the cement, and as it had dried, the tools they brought with them would be incapable of breaking through. The police had to call in a private engineering company, who arrived with their high-grade tools and began drilling through the concrete slab. The engineering team seemed to have weak stomachs, as when they drilled through and saw human hair, they suddenly lost their nerve and refused to keep digging, as they didn't want to see a dead body. It took the police a total of 13 hours to finally talk them into continuing. After fully digging through, the pit was found to be 2.4 meters wide and 6 feet deep. The 4 bodies of the family were found at the bottom, all barefoot and only wearing t-shirts and shorts. At the very bottom was Cheng Hui's body. Both of his hands and feet were tied up with electric wire, and he had suffered multiple stab wounds to his abdomen, back, and neck, with his clothes stained red with blood. The knees, hands, and feet were also tied up with electric wires, and a wire was wrapped around her neck. Her mouth and nose were sealed with a yellow transparent tape. Xiaoying's mouth and nose were covered with tape. Her hands and feet were bound, and her face was distorted. And lastly, Xiaoying's face was distorted. Her hands and feet were bound. Her mouth and nose were sealed, and her eyes were covered with transparent tape. Xiaoyan and Xiaoying had no obvious signs of trauma, which led police to believe they may have been buried alive. Shang-Chi was formally arrested, and when interrogated, he changed his confession. He said that he lied about the affair, but he did try and start one and come on to Annie. Annie was uncomfortable and told Cheng Hui about this. Cheng Hui was enraged and kicked him out of the home and banned him from stepping foot in it again. Afterwards, Shang-Chi returned to the home anyway to apologize, and surprisingly Cheng Hui forgave him. On July 3rd, he returned to the home to start working, and the cousins' relationship seemed to be repaired. Until July 4th, when Shang-Chi again tried to come on to Annie when Cheng Hui was away. Shang-Chi decided to escalate and attempted to molest and fumble with Annie, who ran away and called for help, locking herself in a room. Shang-Chi, not wanting the neighbors alerted, fled the home in a rage. On July 5th, Shang-Chi waited for Cheng Hui to visit his mother at the nursing home to try and force his way into the family home again, claiming that he wanted to issue a second apology. Cheng Hui was worried that this would happen though, and returned home early to see Cheng Hui on the property and trying to get inside to speak to Annie again. The two got into an argument where, in the heat of the moment, he stabbed Cheng Hui of his own volition and not self-defense. The rest of the confession matched the details of his initial one, but with the added detail of filling the makeshift grave with cement. However, after the bodies were taken away for autopsy, it was found that Shang-Chi was still lying. Cheng Hui's murder was far more brutal than Shang-Chi had described. Cheng Hui had suffered from 9 stab wounds on his head and neck, nearly 80 on his body, and 10 stab wounds on his hands and feet. Rather than being suffocated with a plastic bag, and he had been strangled, with the same being true for Xiaoyi. As well, only Xiaoyan's cause of death was as Shenki described. Forensic investigations of the home revealed the cutlery and dishes did not have the family's DNA on them, but they did have Shang-Chi, and that Cheng Hui was not killed in the kitchen. He was likely killed elsewhere, and Annie didn't know until Shang-Chi attacked her next. The weapon Shang-Chi used was not a kitchen knife from the family, and instead one of his own, and the cement he used to bury the corpses he purchased before the murder, which spoke to premeditation. Through investigations, the police also found that Annie's bank cards had been used at ATMs after the time of death, but no money could be withdrawn due to repeated failed PIN number guesses. And lastly, their cash and bank cards were missing, which meant that the motive was robbery and the crime was premeditated. Like usually, whenever the police pointed out a discrepancy in his story, he suddenly gave a new one. According to Shang-Chi, his ancestral home in China needed repairs while his 2 children were in school, and urgently needed 100,000 in cash to make the payment. He was not well liked in his local area, so if he asked to borrow money, he'd be denied. And whenever he went to Hong Kong, he didn't make much money, so he turned to Cheng Hui for help. Cheng Yi had an idea in his head that Cheng Hui was a miser who was far richer than he appeared, and that the reason he had a low salary when he worked for Cheng Hui was because they were using him for cheap labor. On July 3rd, Cheng Yi returned to Hong Kong on his own without telling anyone, and waited until July 5th, when the couple didn't have to go to work. Having a concealed knife on him, he knocked on the door while Cheng Hui was at the nursing home and talked to Annie. Once Cheng Hui returned and saw Shang-Chi went there, he asked Annie to cook something while the two talk. Once Annie left to go to the kitchen, Shang-Chi almost immediately asked to borrow 100,000 Hong Kong dollars. Cheng Hui rejected the request because while he did have the money and even more, he had to spend it on his mother's treatment and his daughter's education. Shang-Chi refused to believe him and accused him of only using him for free and cheap labor. Cheng Hui was angered by the accusation, and when Shang-Chi persisted, he ordered him to leave. Once Cheng Hui turned his back, Shang-Chi charged towards him and covered his mouth before stabbing him from behind. He then restrained a terrified and exiled Xiaoyan, and Xiaoyang searched around the home for cash and the back cards and then demanded to know the password. And Yi purposefully gave a fake password, but at the time Shanky didn't know this. Shanky continued to lie about strangling anyone and insisted that he killed the others by putting tape over their mouths and noses as well as a plastic bag over their head. When Shanky left for the nearest ATM, he realized he had been lied to when the PIN number wouldn't work. He returned home to find that, in his absence, they had all suffocated to death. Shang-Chi noticed the food that Anha had been preparing and decided to eat it next to the 4 corpses while he thought of how to dispose of the body. After stealing 6,000 Hong Kong dollars from Cheng Hui's person, he buried the corpses and tools involved in a small pit before going to sleep at his temporary home. The next morning he woke up and realized that the bodies may be discovered due to the smell escaping from the soil, so he left to buy cement at a store and returned to the home to dig up the pit he had made and poured in the cement before refilling the hole. He would then stay at the home for a little while to answer any calls to Cheng Hui's cell phone or house phone and tell his story about how he was tasked with looking after things while they went on vacation. Shun Qi said he wasn't expecting the charade to be uncovered so quickly. Even now, Shang-Chi was still lying about many details, such as how he purchased the cement before the murder and the cause of Annie and Xiao Yang's death. But the police at this point had stopped caring about getting a truthful confession, as they felt like they had more than enough evidence to proceed. The trial was held at the Hong Kong High Court on October 28, 2010, and he pled not guilty and instead said that his initial story about having an affair with An Hui was actually correct, with Cheng Hui being killed in self-defense and An Xiaoyan and Xiaoyan being killed accidentally. According to him, he only confessed to extorting the family and killing them for financial motives because he was beaten and tortured by the police, with them strangling him and suffocating him with plastic bags until he gave the confession that they wanted. On November 23rd, the jury returned their verdict and unanimously found him guilty of the murder of Cheng Hui and Anai and Xiaohang. On the charge of murdering Xiaohang, however, he was acquitted and instead found guilty of manslaughter, with the jury split 5-2. This ultimately made no difference, though, as for 3 counts of murder and 1 count of manslaughter, Su Shengjiai received a life sentence. The presiding judge said that Shengjiai was utterly devoid of a conscience, worse than a beast, and completely unrepentant, and accused Shang-Chi of fabricating the self-defense story and the affair with Annie not to get a lower sentence, but just to smear their good name post-mortem. Interestingly, Shang-Chi's family living in Hong Kong actually came to his defense, accusing Chen Gui of being a hypocrite and the true villain who was draining Shanky of his money, pocketing money for his work and from Shanky's salary, and simply using Shanky for cheap labor. The neighbors and residents of Ping Chi village were outraged by these claims, and Shanky's family moved back to China to avoid the backlash. The crime was one of the most shocking in Hong Kong's history, and an outpouring of support came to the family, with many visiting the home to give condolences and netizens raising more than enough money to hold a funeral for the family. The family's 9 stray dogs were also adopted and taken in by another family who every July 5th would take them for a walk in Ping Chi village near the home of their former owners. On August 9, 2022, at the age of 55, Su Shenki passed away in Hong Kong's Stanley Prison of liver cancer.
Police emergency operator Bono.
I just got a call from my dad, and his cousin came over his house. He borrowed a shovel and the gas tank with a girl in the car, and she was tied up. And the girl got out of the car, and my dad's cousin went and put her back in the car.
What's the cousin's name?
Mikey King.
Michael King. And what does he look like?
So he has dark hair, he's white, kind of chubby.
What's the cousin driving?
A green Camaro.
The shocking kidnapping of mother of 2, Denise Amber Lee, occurred in broad daylight when she was abducted from her home, blindfolded, and restrained in the back seat of her captor's car. In a struggle with her attacker, she somehow managed to secretly grab his phone and, in a desperate bid to save her life, dialed 911, hoping to provide enough information for help to arrive. Numerous 911 calls related to Denise's disappearance followed in the hours ahead, but unfortunately, due to various errors and mishaps, none were able to save her. The result was a harrowing sequence of events that ended in tragedy. This is the heartbreaking true crime story of Denise Amber Lee. Denise Amber Lee was heading toward the prime of her life. As a mother to 2 precious boys, both under the age of 2, she relished in the joy of nurturing them. Despite her young age of 21, motherhood came to her with an innate sense of ease and dedication, and right from the start she put them first in everything she did. offering up her social life to ensure that she never missed a precious moment and that she was always present to support and care for them. Beyond her maternal duties, Denise was happily married to her soulmate, Nathan Lee, whom she first met during her final year of high school. Together, they shared countless moments of love, laughter, and resilience, navigating through life's highs and lows hand in hand. Despite their tender years, they embodied a maturity and depth of commitment that many twice their age could only dream of. By 2008, Nathan and Denise had been married for 3 years already and had jumped head first into adulthood. Having started a family so soon out of high school, they weren't exactly financially stable, and the reality of providing for 2 little ones on a tight budget was no easy feat. Denise was a stay-at-home mother who took care of her family, while Nathan worked 3 jobs just to make ends meet. His main job was as a meter reader for the Florida Power and Light Company, while he also picked up shift stocking shelves at a local supermarket and spent his summer weekends umpiring little league games just to have some extra cash in his pocket. The pressure of being the sole breadwinner weighed heavily on Nathan, but he was determined to give his family the best life he could. And although times were tough and they literally lived paycheck to paycheck, the Lees found solace in the simple pleasures of life. For Denise, nothing was more important than the love of her family, and she cherished every moment spent with them. Materialistic possessions held no appeal for her, as she found greater value in the sentimental treasures that adorned her life. Perhaps the most precious of all was the $40 ring that Nathan gave her on their first Valentine's Day together. While some may have long forgotten such a small token, Denise wore it every day, a constant reminder of the love that bound them together. The ring spoke volumes about their relationship, representing the unwavering commitment and unbreakable bond that existed between them. For the Lees' happiness was not measured in dollars and cents, but in the richness of their relationships and the depth of their love. And even in the face of financial struggles, they remained steadfast in their devotion to each other. In January 2008, right around the time of the fateful event, Denise and Nathan were hustling hard to save up for their first house while renting a cozy home in Northport, Florida. With its serene atmosphere and proximity to their families, it was the perfect spot to raise their kids in a relatively safe environment. They felt content in their cozy home and slept soundly at night, convinced that they were protected from harm. That was, of course, until that ominous day of January 17, 2008. The morning of January 17, 2008 was a peculiar day in Northport, Florida. The air was unusually warm and the sun beat down on the streets with an almost ominous intensity. But for the Lee family, the day began like any other. Nathan dutifully left for work to start his shift at the Florida Power and Light Company, while Denise stayed back to tend to their sons. They exchanged their usual morning pleasantries, and Nathan promised to check in on her during his break. And true to his word, he called Denise shortly after 11 a.m., eager to hear about their day so far. Denise told him that she was cutting the boys' hair on the back porch while Nathan listened intently, enjoying the sound of his family's voices. She also mentioned that she had turned off the AC to save on electricity, so Nathan advised her to open the windows and let in some fresh air, and Denise confirmed that she'd already done so. Everything seemed to go on as normal, so Nathan bid his wife goodbye and headed back to work, oblivious to the fateful events that would soon unfold. Nathan finished his shift at around 3 p.m., and on his way to the car, he tried to call his wife again to let her know that he was on his way. But strangely enough, she didn't answer. He tried calling her another 8 times during his 25-minute drive home, and uncharacteristically, the phone just kept ringing. Although it was odd not to have a response from Denise, he didn't become concerned until he reached their house. As he pulled into the driveway of their house, he immediately noticed that the windows were all closed, contradicting Denise's earlier claim that she had opened them to combat the heat. But what was even more alarming was the fact that there was no sign of his wife. As he searched the house, his mind racing with all the possibilities of what could have happened, he made another odd discovery. His 2 sons were sleeping in the same crib together, something Denise never did, and to make matters worse, he also found Denise's phone, keys, and purse still inside the house. He instantly knew that something was seriously wrong, so he immediately called 911. After getting off the phone with the 911 operator, Nathan called his father-in-law Rick Goff. Rick was a police sergeant with 25 years of experience at the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office. Aware of the common tendency for reports of missing spouses to be overlooked, he made it his mission to ensure that the matter received immediate attention. At 4 p.m., detectives arrived at the Lee's residence and found no signs of forced entry or struggle, leaving them with nothing but a baffling mystery to solve. The house was a dead end, so police began knocking on neighbors' doors in search of clues, and it was then that they stumbled upon a promising lead. One neighbor said that she had seen something suspicious between 1:30 and 2 p.m. A dark green Chevy Camaro driving very slowly past her house, circling back and forth at least 5 times. The neighbor became suspicious and immediately went out into her front garden to see what the driver was up to. She made sure to make direct eye contact with the driver so that he knew that she was watching, but at that very moment, he pulled into Nathan and Denise's driveway. She assumed the driver was probably lost and that he finally found the house he was looking for, so she went back inside and continued watching TV. However, she couldn't shake the odd feeling she had about the car. So about 10 minutes later, she stepped back outside and saw the car pulling away. Though she couldn't see who was inside, she had gotten a good look at the driver and the vehicle, allowing her to give the police a detailed description. With this new information, an alert was sent out to all nearby units to be on the lookout for a dark green Camaro with a chubby Caucasian male with graying hair in his mid to late 30s. Despite their relentless efforts, they wouldn't make any progress in the case for the next 2 hours until 6:14 when they got another 911 call, this time from Denise herself. Denise displayed incredible courage and resourcefulness when she found herself in this harrowing situation. Despite being blindfolded and bound in the back seat of her captor's car, she was able to secretly obtain his cell phone and dial 911 without him noticing. In a remarkable display of composure, she spoke to the operator in a way that fooled her captor into thinking she was talking to him. She even cleverly convinced him to turn down the radio when the operator was having trouble hearing her. Denise's remarkable composure and resourcefulness during the 911 call, despite being in an extremely distressing situation, is truly remarkable. She was able to provide vital information to the operator, including her full name and street address, while also conveying that she was being held against her will by someone she didn't know. Although she did everything she could to ensure her safe rescue, the unfortunate reality was that the phone her captor used was an older generation device without GPS capabilities, making it impossible for law enforcement to trace the call. They were, however, able to identify the man who had registered the number. Michael Lee King was a 36-year-old plumber who lived just a stone's throw away from Denise and Nathan's home in Northport. His life had recently taken a downward spiral with months of unemployment, bankruptcy, and a pending foreclosure on his home. He was also recently divorced and was left as the sole provider for his 12-year-old son. King had an extremely low IQ, estimated to be around 76, which placed him on the border of mental disability. The low IQ had been attributed to a traumatic sledding accident when he was just 6 years old that left him with severe frontal lobe damage. Despite his difficulties, he had led a seemingly normal life without any criminal history until now. During Denise's 911 call, her captor could be heard mentioning his cousin Harold. Well, just after her call was terminated at 6:23 p.m., the phone lines lit up once more, this time from Sabrina Muxlow, the 17-year-old daughter of Michael's cousin Harold. Sadly, at the time of Sabrina's call, Denise was a mere 4 miles away from her home. During the distressing phone call, Sabrina confirmed that Michael King was responsible for Denise's abduction. The events leading up to Sabrina's 911 call are harrowing. Michael arrived unexpectedly at his cousin Harold's home around 6 p.m., seeking assistance with his lawnmower, which had apparently become stuck in mud in his front yard. He asked to borrow a gas can, a flashlight, and a shovel. As Harold handed him the items, Denise suddenly leaped out of Michael's car and sprinted across the road, shouting for Harold to call the police. Michael chased after her, and after catching up to her, he forcefully pulled her back to his vehicle before shoving her into the back of his car. It was also during this altercation that Denise managed to take Michael's phone from him and how she ultimately managed to call 911. When Harold witnessed this particular scene, he immediately went to his cousin to ask what was going on. but Michael immediately dismissed his concerns and told him not to worry about it, before hastily speeding off. Harold's gut instinct told him that something wasn't right, but he tried to rationalize it as just another domestic dispute between Michael and a new girlfriend, given his cousin's tendency to engage in tumultuous relationships. But as the minutes passed and the more he thought about what he witnessed, the weight of the encounter continued to gnaw at him. He knew that he couldn't remain silent, and he needed to tell someone what he saw. But for some strange reason, Harold didn't call the police, but instead confided in his 17-year-old daughter. Perhaps it was the fear of implicating himself or the worry of being labeled a snitch, but either way, there was no doubt that his actions that day drastically reduced the chances of finding Denise before it was too late. At 6:30 p.m., just 7 minutes after Sabrina Muxlow's call, another 911 call came in. The caller was a woman named Jane Kowalski, who was traveling down Highway 41 near the Charlotte County line. While waiting at a stoplight, Jane heard what she believed was a child screaming in terror coming from the car next to her. Her heart raced as she looked over, only to lock eyes with the driver, a chubby white male with graying hair driving a Camaro. What sounded like a child screaming to Jane was actually Denise screaming for her life, in hopes that someone would hear her. Having been near the Sarasota County line just moments ago, Jane thought her call went through to the Sarasota County Police Station. But she actually crossed the county line and her call was diverted to the Charlotte County Police Station where Denise's father works. Jane did her best to stay with the driver and even tried to get the license plate off the vehicle. But Michael seemed to be onto her and would slow down whenever she did, making it difficult for her to have a good look at his plates. This is when Jane made her 911 call, and when Michael made a sharp left on Toledo Blade, speeding off toward Interstate 75. Police finally had the information they needed as well as the location of the car. But this is where things would take a frustrating turn. Because Jane had crossed the county line, her call was diverted to the Charlotte County Police Station, while all the previous 911 calls related to Denise's abduction had been logged with the Sarasota Police Station. This wouldn't normally be an issue if the calls were logged correctly and nearby units were dispatched. But unfortunately, this never happened. The office sounded pretty chaotic, and the operator was writing down the information on a piece of paper and yelling it out to dispatchers in the office instead of capturing it on the system. Although the dispatcher acknowledged the information coming from the operator, it was never relayed to patrol units in the area. While the dispatchers later cited shift changes and understaffing as contributing factors to the failure, they were both suspended without pay in the aftermath. Despite the coordinated efforts of a search helicopter and multiple patrol units searching for Denise, the crucial information regarding Michael's car's whereabouts wasn't communicated to them. What's even worse is that it later emerged that a patrol officer was stationed at Toledo Blade at the time of the call, and Michael and Denise probably drove right past them. The following day, Jane Kowalski recognized Michael's photo on the news and immediately contacted the police to provide additional information. To her shock, she was informed that they had no idea who she was and that the information was never passed on to them. At 9:16 p.m., 6 hours after Denise was reported missing, a state trooper positioned on Toledo Blade spotted Michael King's green Camaro. Without hesitation, the trooper gave chase and eventually executed a skilled felony stop, blocking the suspect's car with his own. He immediately drew his weapon and ordered Michael to exit his vehicle. Despite being ordered to do so 5 times, Michael refused to comply. It wasn't until the officer threatened to use force that Michael eventually relented and surrendered. When police apprehended him, he was wet from the waist down and his shoes were caked in mud. The phone that Denise had used to call 911 was found in his pocket with the battery removed. Upon checking the vehicle, they found no sign of Denise, but a muddy shovel was lying on the back seat. They also found the SIM card of the phone and a gas can on the passenger side. Upon further investigation, Denise's palm print would later be found on the outside of the driver's window, and her blood on a blanket in the back. But this wasn't all they found. Hair strands torn out from the root were found tucked into the pocket behind the driver's seat, along with Denise's heart-shaped ring, the one Michael had given her on their first Valentine's Day. Denise had left her own evidence to ensure that Michael wouldn't escape justice. Despite the overwhelming evidence against him, Michael King refused to cooperate and maintained his innocence throughout. bizarrely claiming that he and Denise had consensual sex before they were ambushed by men in ski masks who kidnapped them. He claimed that he was a victim too and even took credit for Denise's 911 call, claiming that he was the one who set it up. He told police that he somehow managed to escape, and the men drove away with Denise, and he didn't know where she was. One day later, on January 18th, police found the naked body of Denise Amber Lee in a shallow grave, a short distance from Toledo Blade, the very same road where Jane had told the operator that the Camaro was driving the previous day. She suffered a single gunshot wound to the head, and it was evident that the gun had been placed directly against her temple. A short distance from her body, they found Denise's underwear, and after careful examination, they found it to contain traces of Michael's semen. Michael King eventually went on trial facing charges of first-degree murder, sexual battery, and kidnapping. He pled not guilty to all charges. Throughout the proceedings, his defense team attempted to paint a picture of a hard-working single father with no prior criminal record or history of violence. They suggested that Michael had been pushed to the brink by mounting personal and financial hardships, ultimately causing him to snap. They also focused their strategy on Michael's childhood sledding accident, which had caused damage to his frontal lobe, arguing that this accident had caused significant behavioral issues for Michael and may have had a hand in his actions. During the trial, the state presented its own expert witnesses who testified that although Michael King had a low IQ, he was still able to understand the difference between right and wrong and fully comprehend the consequences of his actions. Another witness testified that Michael had been at a gun range just 2 hours prior to the kidnapping of Denise and that he'd been in possession of the murder weapon. The state argued that Michael had been practicing for his heinous act at the range and then went on a search for a victim. He drove around for a while before randomly deciding on Denise's home, after noticing that she was home alone. After abducting her, he took her back to his own home where he repeatedly assaulted her for hours before going to his cousin's house to borrow the items he needed to bury her later. On August 28, 2009, after 2.5 hours of deliberations, Michael King was found guilty of first-degree murder, involuntary sexual battery, and kidnapping. The jury recommended the death penalty. He tried to appeal his sentence in 2012, but it was ultimately rejected, and he remains on death row to this day. Denise's family went on to file a wrongful death lawsuit against the Charlotte County Police following the dispatcher's errors. This was settled out of court for $1,250,000 after Nathan paid nearly $500,000 in lawyer's fees. He put the rest of the money into a college fund for his kids and also purchased a modest home for the family. In the serene, charming town of Cedar Grove, the brutal murder of Henry Callahan sent ripples of shock through the community. What once seemed like a tranquil, close-knit suburb was upended by a crime of passion and betrayal that exposed the dark side of otherwise idyllic lives. August 2015. Central to this upheaval were the Callahans. Henry, a 50-year-old real estate mogul renowned for his charisma and business savvy, and his wife Clara, a 48-year-old boutique owner with a flair for fashion and a captivating personality. For over 15 years, they had been the community's cornerstones. Their marriage was flawless, almost too flawless, and that's how the whole community viewed them. They were close friends with their next-door neighbors, the Parkers, Simon, a university professor, and his wife, Emily, a landscape architect. They had recently moved to Cedar Grove with their 21-year-old son, Jerry, to escape the urban chaos and seek a quieter life. These neighbors never knew that their lives were about to turn around for the worst. In fact, this is putting it lightly. Their lives were about to crumble in such a way that it shook the entire community and even the country. Henry Callahan had always been an ambitious man. He was born to a middle-class family in Detroit and with sheer willpower and intelligence, clawed his way up through the real estate industry with a combination of charm and relentless drive. By his early 40s, he had built his real estate empire, his name synonymous with success, and he was the sort of man that everyone wanted to relate with. Clara, on the other hand, came from a background of affluence, the daughter of a renowned author and a classical pianist. She grew up in an environment that valued culture and refinement. Clara had studied art history at college, dreaming of curating in a museum, but she decided to hold it off because her boyfriend then wanted them to settle down. But along the lines, he left her for another woman. She was heartbroken and lost all the will to further her dream of a museum. Then she met Henry, and they kicked off instantly and decided to get married. That was when something happened. 2 years into their marriage, she took in. The family was so happy, and Clara herself was super excited about this. Henry was taking more time away from work to take care of her, and their family was the very definition of happiness. Sadly, things changed, when tragically, their child born premature did not survive, and Clara's subsequent efforts to conceive had been unsuccessful. Let's go back a bit to how they met. Their paths crossed at a charity auction in 2000. Henry, already successful, but lacking in personal connections, was immediately captivated by Clara's elegance and grace. Clara, a former model who had endured a difficult relationship and a heartbreak, saw in Henry a chance to rebuild her life. He offered her emotional support and financial stability. Their courtship was swift and passionate, leading to a grand wedding. The ceremony was lavish, held in a historic mansion with silk drapes, crystal chandeliers, and a garden filled with thousands of roses. Clara wore a designer gown, while Henry looked like a distinguished businessman. The early years of their marriage were blissful. Henry's career soared, earning him wealth and accolades. He became a partner at his firm, known for his success. Clara found solace in opening a boutique, her sanctuary, where she could channel her creativity and passion for fashion. The boutique thrived, becoming popular among the town's elite, and gave Clara a sense of purpose. As the years passed, their perfect life began to dull. Henry's work demanded more time, with late nights at the office and frequent business trips. The once inseparable couple drifted apart. Clara, feeling increasingly isolated, poured herself into her boutique. She expanded her business, hosted events, and sought to fill the void with her work. The loss of their child was a turning point. It was a silent wound that neither spoke of but both felt deeply. The nursery they had prepared remained empty, a constant reminder of their grief. The inability to conceive again added to the strain. Clara's dreams of a family faded, replaced by emptiness. She attended fertility treatments alone, enduring the emotional and physical toll in silence. Henry, though supportive, buried himself in work, unable to confront the shared pain. Their home, once filled with laughter and warmth, grew cold and silent. Clara would sit in the nursery for hours, surrounded by the unfulfilled promise of motherhood. Henry, when he was home, retreated into his study, drowning himself in work to escape the unbearable reality. Their conversations became brief, lacking intimacy. Clara's boutique sadly became a refuge from the emptiness of her home. She spent long hours there, finding temporary solace in the activity and creative projects. Yet, every evening, she returned to a house that felt increasingly like a stranger's home. The distance between them was palpable, a chasm neither knew how to bridge. Their shared grief and unspoken fears festered, creating tension in their lives. By the summer of 2015, the Callahans' marriage had become a shadow of what it used to be. To outsiders, they were still the golden couple. Henry was on the verge of closing a monumental deal that would solidify his status in the industry. Clara's boutique was flourishing, her designs gaining a loyal following. But behind closed doors, they were simply roommates. They were more like strangers. Conversations were sparse, focusing on schedules and social events. Physical intimacy had become rare, each touch a reminder of their unspoken grief and unmet expectations. Both Henry and Clara found it easier to maintain the illusion of happiness than to confront the chasm that had grown between them. Unbeknownst to them, this fragile balance was about to be disrupted in a way that would affect not just their lives, but the entire community of Cedar Grove. The Parkers had moved into the house next door to the Callahans in early 2011 seeking a fresh start. Simon, a distinguished literature professor, had taken a position at a nearby university, drawn by the promise of a quieter life away from the bustling city. Emily, a successful landscape architect, had embraced the move as an opportunity to bring her creative vision to new projects. Their son, Jerry, a college junior studying environmental science, was spending the summer at home working on a local conservation project. The Parkers quickly became known for their warmth and intelligence, fitting seamlessly into the chill vibe of Cedar Grove. Simon's engaging lectures at the university earned him respect, while Emily's stunning garden designs became the talk of the neighborhood. Emily, though initially reluctant about the move, found herself enjoying the tranquility and natural beauty of their new home. It was during a neighborhood block party in late June that Jerry Parker first saw Clara Callahan in a new light. The Callahans were hosting the event, and Henry was, as usual, the center of attention, discussing his latest business ventures. Clara, feeling out of place among the crowd, had retreated to the patio to get some fresh air. Jerry, seeking a break from socializing, happened to wander outside at the same moment. Their eyes met, and Jerry offered Clara a tentative smile. They struck up a conversation about gardening, a topic Clara had recently taken an interest in to fill her lonely days. Jerry, with his knowledge of environmental science, shared tips and suggestions, and a bond began to form. Over the next few weeks, Clara and Jerry found reasons to spend time together. Clara invited Jerry to help with her garden, and Jerry was glad for the chance to apply his studies practically. As you would or wouldn't expect, their first kiss happened one rainy afternoon in early July. Jerry had come over to discuss a new garden layout, and as they worked, a sudden downpour forced them to seek shelter in the Callahan sunroom. As they stood by the window watching the rain, an unspoken tension filled the air. Clara, feeling a connection she hadn't felt in years, leaned in and kissed Jerry. For Jerry, the kiss was a revelation, a mix of excitement and fear. Despite the complexity of their feelings, they found themselves drawn together, their interactions growing more frequent and intense. They were careful, aware of the risks. Their meetings were discreet, often in Clara's boutique or secluded spots around town. Yet as the summer progressed, maintaining their secret became increasingly difficult. They almost got caught several times. Close calls and near discoveries heightened their anxiety, but the intensity of their emotions kept them coming back. Clara felt a resurgence of joy and passion. And to be honest, this was something totally different from her life with Henry. Jerry, captivated by Clara's sophistication and the thrill of their forbidden relationship, found himself developing genuine feelings and falling deeper and deeper for the older married woman. On August 10th, 2015, Cedar Grove awoke to another blistering summer day. For Henry Callahan, it was a pivotal day. He had this very crucial meeting that could secure his largest deal yet. He left early, leaving Clara in bed, lost in her thoughts. Clara, knowing Henry would be gone all day, sent a text to Jerry asking him to come over in the afternoon. At this point, Jerry was growing increasingly uncomfortable with his feelings for Clara. He loved the woman, but this love just didn't make any sense at all. Jerry then decided that it was about time he ended this and saw the message as an opportunity to confront his feelings. He replied, agreeing to meet. The day dragged on for both of them. Clara went through the motions at her boutique, distracted and anxious. Jerry, working on his conservation project, found it hard to focus. At 1:30 p.m., Jerry made his way to the Callahan house, his heart pounding. Clara welcomed him with a nervous smile, leading him to the sunroom where they had first kissed. Jerry began to speak, but Clara, misinterpreting his hesitation, silenced him with a kiss. Despite their misgivings, they gave in to the moment, their need for each other overwhelming their doubts. Meanwhile, across town, Henry Callahan was in his office, his frustration mounting. The numbers for his deal weren't aligning, and he knew he faced a long night of revisions and negotiations. Henry Callahan made a snap decision. He would go home, regroup, and collect his thoughts, and return to the office later to finish up before dinner. At 2:15 p.m., his car pulled into the driveway of their lakeside house in Crestwood. He noticed Jerry Parker's rusty truck parked a little way down the street but thought nothing of it. Probably helping Clara with some errands, he mused as he unlocked the front door. The house was quiet, but something felt off. A half-empty glass of orange juice sat on the kitchen counter. This was very weird because Clara didn't even like orange. Then he heard it, a muffled sound coming from upstairs. Frowning, he climbed the stairs, the noise growing louder as he approached the master bedroom. What he saw when he opened the door would be forever seared into his memory. His wife, the woman he had loved for 15 years, was in their bed with Jerry Parker, the 21-year-old neighbor's son, who he never thought was close to her. Henry's shock turned to rage. Before he could think, he lunged forward, shouting and asking what the hell they were doing. Jerry, in a panic, scrambled to get off the bed, knocking over the nightstand in the process. Clara screamed, trying to pull the sheets around herself. Henry's fury propelled him forward, and he grabbed Jerry by the collar, yanking him off the bed. Jerry struggled, gasping, pleaded with Henry that he could explain. But Henry was beyond reason, his fists flying. In the chaos, Jerry's hand found the heavy lamp on the bedside table. Desperation driving him, he swung it wildly. The lamp connected with Henry's head with a sickening thud. Henry staggered, his eyes wide with shock and betrayal, before collapsing to the floor. The room fell into a haunting silence. Clara's scream pierced the quiet as she scrambled to cover herself and process what had just happened. Blood pooled rapidly around Henry's motionless form. Jerry dropped the lamp, his hands trembling. Horror and disbelief etched on his face. He looked at Clara, his voice barely a whisper. "What have we done?" Clara, her voice shaking but determined, insisted they hide the body. She told Jerry that she can't let him go to jail. And when she said this, her eyes were wild with fear. Jerry nodded numbly. They quickly dressed, their minds racing with panic and fear. They wrapped Henry's body in a sheet, struggling under its weight as they carried it down the stairs. The task was grueling, each step filled with dread and regret. They finally managed to heave Henry's body into the bed of Jerry's truck, panting from the exertion. Clara drove Henry's car to a nearby parking lot, leaving it there to make it look like he had gone out. She then returned home, where she and Jerry began the grim task of cleaning up the blood. Every swipe of the cloth felt like a betrayal, the scent of bleach mingling with their guilt. The master bedroom, once a sanctuary, now felt like a crime scene. For 2 days, Clara and Jerry avoided each other, the weight of their secret pressing down on them. Clara answered calls from Henry's office, telling his colleagues that he was away on a business trip. But when Henry failed to show up for a critical meeting, his office sent someone to the house to check on him. The HR manager stood at the door, suspicion clouding his eyes as he asked why she hadn't filed a missing person report. Clara, her heart pounding, tried to stay calm, lying that she thought he was on a business trip. To deflect a suspicion, she called the police right then and there. The police arrived quickly, their presence adding to the tension. They began investigating and questioning Clara, who struggled to maintain her composure. Meanwhile, Jerry was back at school, consumed by guilt and fear. He had cut off communication with Clara, and they had agreed not to speak until the situation calmed down. Detective Laura Mitchell was assigned to the case. A seasoned investigator with a sharp mind, she immediately sensed something was off. She started with routine questions but quickly delved deeper. Clara's story was full of holes, and her nervousness was palpable. Mitchell's keen eyes missed nothing, noting every tremor in Clara's voice and every inconsistency in her account. The case was becoming more complex, and the shadows of suspicion grew longer over Cedar Grove. Detective Laura Mitchell began her questioning, keenly observing Clara's every move. She asked Clara about the last time she saw her husband. Clara, trying to sound convincing, claimed he had left for a business trip on Monday morning. When pressed for details about the trip, Clara shook her head, stating that he often didn't mention his destinations as it was part of his job. Mitchell nodded and made notes, requesting access to Henry's phone records and emails. Clara, feeling trapped, agreed. Over the next few days, the investigation intensified. Mitchell's team found nothing in Henry's phone and email records to indicate a business trip. Neighbors mentioned seeing Jerry's truck at the Callahan house the day Henry disappeared, prompting Mitchell to return to Clara. When questioned about Jerry's truck, Clara lied, saying he was helping with some yard work. Mitchell, skeptical, noted the implausibility of yard work in the middle of a hot July afternoon, but let it slide for the moment. shifting her focus to Jerry Parker. Jerry, struggling with the memory of Henry's lifeless body, was approached by Mitchell at his school. When questioned about his presence at the Callahan house, Jerry repeated Clara's lie about yard work, his voice shaking. Mitchell, sensing his fear, didn't believe him. She suggested that coming clean would be better for him, but Jerry maintained his composure and insisted he knew nothing. Mitchell knew she needed more evidence. She called in forensic teams to the Callahan house where they discovered traces of blood that had been hastily cleaned. Clara's story began to unravel further. Mitchell noted inconsistencies in Clara's timeline and her increasing anxiety. Despite Clara's efforts to maintain the facade, the pressure mounted. The breakthrough came from an anonymous tipster who had seen Clara and Jerry together frequently, their interactions suspiciously intimate. Mitchell investigated their relationship more deeply, uncovering secret emails and text messages that revealed the depth of their affair and their desperate attempts to keep it hidden. Confronted with the evidence, Clara's calm demeanor began to crack. When asked to explain the communications with Jerry, she tried to downplay their relationship as mere friendship, but Mitchell was relentless. The detective pointed out that friends don't exchange such messages and mentioned the blood traces found in the house. Clara stood her ground, insisting that Henry had left for a business trip. Mitchell turned her attention back to Jerry, who had been avoiding contact with Clara. She arranged for Jerry to be brought in for further questioning. Feeling the pressure, Jerry decided to hire a lawyer. During the interrogation, Mitchell laid out the evidence piece by piece, eroding Jerry's defenses. She mentioned the blood found in the house and the lack of a business trip, pressing for the truth. Jerry's silence, advised by his lawyer, spoke volumes. Forensic experts confirmed the blood evidence as Henry's. With mounting evidence, Mitchell obtained a search warrant for Jerry's truck, where they found fibers matching the sheets from the Callahan house and further blood traces. Henry's body was discovered in the nearby parking lot, hastily concealed. With irrefutable evidence in hand, Mitchell moved swiftly to arrest Clara and Jerry. Clara was taken into custody, her face a mask of resignation, while Jerry was arrested, his fate sealed by the overwhelming proof of their crime. The community of Cedar Grove was rocked by the scandal. The idyllic facade shattered forever. As the trial progressed, more secrets emerged. Henry's colleagues testified about his mounting stress and frequent arguments with Clara. Neighbors spoke of the tension they had sensed in the Callahan household. The jury faced a complex web of motivations and actions, each thread leading to the tragic climax. Clara took the stand, her composure cracking under the weight of her guilt. She admitted to the affair but insisted she never meant for Henry to die. She described the moments before Henry's death, explaining how Jerry, in a panic, had grabbed the lamp. Jerry, almost in tears, recounted the fateful day with a mixture of regret and sorrow. He described the confrontation with Henry, the struggle, and the moment he struck Henry in a blind panic. Jerry's parents sat in the courtroom, their faces etched with grief and disbelief. They listened as their son detailed how he had become entangled in Clara's life and how his actions had led to Henry's death. They couldn't reconcile the image of their beloved son with the events that had transpired. Their sorrow was palpable, a stark contrast to the stoic facade Jerry tried to maintain. Mitchell's testimony was crucial. She outlined the investigation, the inconsistencies in Clara and Jerry's stories, and the forensic evidence that ultimately led to their arrests. She detailed the discovery of Henry's body, the fibers in Jerry's truck, and the blood traces in the Callahan house. Her methodical presentation painted a clear picture of guilt. The courtroom was tense as the jury deliberated for days. The weight of the decision was evident, the silence in the room almost unbearable, when the jury finally returned with a verdict. The foreman announced the decision. Jerry Parker, we find you guilty of second-degree murder. Clara Callahan, we find you guilty of being an accessory to murder. Clara was sentenced to 15 years in prison, while Jerry received a 25-year sentence. The community of Cedar Grove was left to pick up the pieces, forever changed by the events that had unfolded. Detective Mitchell, haunted by the case, couldn't help but wonder what might have been if different choices had been made. The Callahans and Parkers had been ordinary people, their lives intertwined in ways no one could have predicted. The tragedy served as a harsh reminder of how delicate the veneer of normalcy can be. In the quiet aftermath, Cedar Grove struggled to reclaim its peaceful way of life. The Callahan case cast a long shadow, a constant reminder that even the most idyllic communities can conceal dark secrets. The Parker family, devastated by the revelations and their son's imprisonment, retreated from public life. Their suffering highlighted the extensive impact of the tragic event. The Callahan house, once a symbol of prosperity and unity, now stood vacant, a mute witness to the vibrant life that once filled its rooms.
Hampstead Heath is a prominent and expansive park in London, England. Spanning over 320 hectares, it ranks among the largest green spaces in the city, drawing numerous visitors and tourists for relaxation. The park is renowned for its breathtaking natural beauty, serene paths, and pristine lakes. Yet, on June 15, 2019, it experienced a harrowing tragedy that drastically altered its tranquil ambiance. Sarah Mitchell was born on March 5, 1987, in a tranquil region on the edge of London, England. She is the youngest child in a family of 3 siblings. Her parents, Mr., James, and Mrs. Elizabeth, are hard workers and always give special love and attention to their children. Mr. James works in a mechanical workshop, and Mrs. Elizabeth is a nurse at a local hospital. Sarah's childhood was filled with beautiful memories. Little Sarah is known as an obedient child, always studying hard and helping her parents with housework. Since childhood, Sarah has shown a special interest in teaching. She often organizes small classes for children in the neighborhood and guides them in doing their homework. This passion gradually became Sarah's career goal as she grew older. After completing primary and secondary school, Sarah entered the University of London, where she studied primary education. During her time at university, Sarah not only excelled in her studies but also actively participated in social and volunteer activities. She often spends her free time helping children at community education centers and organizing free lessons for children in difficult circumstances. David Mitchell was born on August 12, 1984, to a middle-class family in the Kensington area, London, England. David is the eldest child in a family of 3 siblings. David grew up in an environment with a lot of pressure to succeed. He was always encouraged to study well and achieve great achievements. David excelled in his studies from a young age, always at the top of his class and admired by his friends and teachers. However, pressure from his family made him closed and difficult to approach. After completing high school, David was accepted to Oxford University, where he studied finance. Here, he continued to excel in his studies and graduated with honors. After graduating, David started working at a large financial company in London. With ability and hard work, he quickly advanced in his career and became a famous financial manager. Sarah Mitchell and David Mitchell first met in the summer of 2008 at a mutual friend's BBQ party. The party was held at Hyde Park, a popular location in London, where people often gather on weekends to enjoy fresh air and participate in outdoor activities. Sarah, then 21, was a recent education graduate from London University and preparing to start teaching at a primary school in Hampstead Heath. She is a gentle and lovely woman, always attracting the attention of everyone around her with her sincerity and enthusiasm. David, then 24 years old, was a young and ambitious finance officer at a large financial company in London. He is an elegant and intelligent man with attractive looks and a confident demeanor. David regularly participates in social events to expand his relationships and build his professional network. The BBQ party in Hyde Park is an opportunity for Sarah and David to meet and chat. Sarah went to the party with a few college friends, while David went with a colleague. They were introduced to each other by a mutual friend who noticed a compatibility between them. From the first time they met, Sarah and David were attracted to each other. Sarah was impressed with David's elegant appearance and intelligent way of speaking, while David felt attracted by Sarah's gentleness and enthusiasm. They quickly started talking and realized that they had many things in common in terms of interests and outlook on life. After the BBQ party, David proactively invited Sarah to dinner to continue the conversation. Their first date took place at a cozy little Italian restaurant in London's Soho area. The two had a wonderful evening talking about work, hobbies, and dreams in life. Sarah told David about her passion for teaching and her desire to help children develop holistically. David shares about his financial career and future plans. Their conversation was very natural and sincere, making them both feel more comfortable and closer. After their first date, Sarah and David continued to meet and spend a lot of time together. They often go to the movies, have dinner, and participate in outdoor activities together. Their relationship quickly progressed and became deeper. Sarah and David both feel they have found their perfect match. Sarah loves David's intelligence and ambition, while David appreciates Sarah's gentleness and affection. They both have common goals and dreams, making it easy for them to sympathize and support each other in life. After nearly 2 years of dating, David decided to propose to Sarah. On February 14, 2010, during a romantic trip to Paris, David proposed to Sarah at the top of the Eiffel Tower. Sarah, filled with emotion and happiness, agreed immediately. Their marriage was celebrated in the summer of 2010, attended by family and close friends. The wedding took place in an ancient church in Hampstead, London, and the after-party was held at a luxury hotel. Their wedding day was filled with joy and happiness, marking the beginning of a new chapter in Sarah and David's lives. After getting married, Sarah and David moved to live together in a lovely little house near Hampstead Heath. Their married life was initially very happy. Sarah continued her elementary school teaching job, while David continued his career in finance. They welcomed 2 adorable children, a boy and a girl, making their small family even more complete. Sarah has always been a devoted mother and exemplary wife. She spends a lot of time taking care of and educating her children and always supports and encourages David at work. David, although busy with work, always tries to spend time with his family. That beautiful marriage did not last long. In mid-March 2017, as usual, David worked at a large financial company in London. He met Emily Brown for the first time and was attracted to her. David is an experienced financial manager and has worked at this company for over 10 years. He is famous in the company for his intelligence, determination, and excellent working ability. Emily, then 27 years old, was a newly hired employee as a financial specialist. She is a young, dynamic, and ambitious woman with the goal of developing a career in the financial sector. Initially, the relationship between David and Emily was just a normal colleague relationship. Emily admires David for his career successes and frequently seeks his advice. David, with his experience and ingenuity, is always willing to help and guide Emily in her work. They often discuss projects and financial plans together, which makes them closer. In June 2017, the company held a seminar and dinner at a luxury hotel in London's West End. This party is an opportunity for employees in the company to socialize, connect, and relax after stressful working hours. During the party, David and Emily had many opportunities to talk and share about their personal lives. David told Emily about the difficulties in his married life, and Emily shared about her dreams and aspirations in her career. After the party, David and Emily continued to communicate with each other by phone and text message. They started meeting outside of work, and gradually their relationship turned from colleagues to lovers. Emily is attracted to David's intelligence and success, while David feels attracted to Emily's youthfulness and charm. After starting an extramarital relationship, David and Emily often found ways to meet without being discovered. They choose small, hidden cafes on less frequented streets in London. In the mornings, before starting work, David and Emily often meet at their favorite coffee shop, where they can comfortably chat and share thoughts and feelings that they cannot express. In the work environment, luxury restaurants and hotels in the West End area also became their dating places. David and Emily carefully chose places where they thought they wouldn't meet anyone they knew. They always come and go separately to avoid attracting attention. Romantic evenings by candlelight, deep and emotional conversations made their relationship grow closer. David, although married, cannot resist Emily's attraction. He felt comfortable and happy when he was with her, something he no longer felt during his marriage with Sarah. Emily gives David a new, youthful, and energetic feeling. She understands and shares with him the pressures and difficulties at work, something Sarah can no longer do in David's eyes. Every time he is with Emily, David feels like he can relive the romantic and adventurous feelings of the first days of love. She knows how to make him laugh, make him forget the stresses of everyday life. Emily's sweet words and caring gestures made David feel appreciated and loved. Emily, with strong feelings for David, is willing to do anything to keep him by her side. She knows that David is having difficulty in his married life and always tries to create a comfortable, pressure-free space when with him. Emily always listened and comforted David, helping him find peace and comfort in her arms. Emily is not only David's lover, but also his confidant. She shares with him her dreams, aspirations, and worries about the future. Emily's understanding and empathy created a deep bond between them. She always tries to make every moment together special and memorable. Their relationship becomes deeper and closer with each passing day. Frequent text messages and phone calls, secret dates, and emotional encounters have made the relationship between David and Emily stronger and stronger. They have created a private world where it's just the two of them, and in that world, they feel truly happy and fulfilled. Emily always seems thoughtful and interested in David, down to the smallest things. She clearly remembers his every hobby and habit and always finds a way to make him happy. David, although he knew that this relationship was wrong, could not deny that Emily gave him the feelings that he had long lost in his marriage to Sarah. However, this relationship also has many potential dangers. David and Emily always had to live in fear of being discovered. They must be careful in every action and word, avoiding revealing any clues that could lead to disclosure. Every time they meet, they have to face danger, but their strong feelings make them defy everything to be together. David and Emily, while passionately in love, did not realize that this relationship was gradually pushing them into a path with no way out. Their impulsive and thoughtless decisions led to a cruel and tragic plan, causing both of them to pay dearly for what they had done. During the time the affair between David and Emily developed, Sarah Mitchell began to notice unusual changes in her husband's attitude and behavior. David becomes distant and less interested in his family than before. He often comes home late, citing busy work and long meetings. These reasons initially seem reasonable, but their constant repetition makes Sarah begin to have doubts. David often receives text messages and calls at inopportune times, and he always appears awkward when answering them in front of Sarah. He also started spending more time taking care of his appearance, something he paid little attention to before. In the evenings, when Sarah and the children went to bed, David still sat in front of the computer or went out without explaining clearly. Sarah, with the wife's premonition, decided to find out the truth. She began to monitor David's behavior more carefully. Sarah recorded the time David arrived home, checking his phone for messages and calls every chance she got. She also noticed changes in David's work schedule and compared them with what he told her. One time, Sarah discovered a luxury restaurant bill in David's coat pocket. This further increased her suspicions as David had not mentioned going out to dinner. Sarah decides to investigate David's relationship further. Sarah begins to collect evidence about David's extramarital affair. She found text messages and emails between David and Emily, which contained a lot of emotional content and plans to meet secretly. Sarah also discovered photos of David and Emily together at cafes and restaurants. This evidence left Sarah heartbroken and angry, but she knew she needed to face the truth. One evening, while David was showering, Sarah rummaged through his phone and found emotional messages with Emily. The messages show that their relationship has been going on for a while, and they often see each other in private places. Sarah took pictures of these messages as evidence. In December 2018, Sarah decided to confront David about her suspicions. One evening, when the children were in bed, Sarah asked David directly about his relationship with Emily. David initially denied it, trying to justify that it was just work and nothing special. However, when Sarah presented the clear evidence she had collected, David could no longer deny it. This confrontation led to a big argument between the couple. Sarah, in anger and pain, asked David to end his relationship with Emily and return to his family. She insisted that he needed to choose between his family and Emily. David, even though he knew he was wrong, still couldn't give up on Emily. He feels that he has found the love and comfort with Emily that he no longer felt during his marriage to Sarah. The conflict between Sarah and David becomes increasingly fierce. Sarah cannot accept David continuing his relationship with Emily, and she begins to think about divorce. However, she also worries about her children's future if the family breaks up. Sarah tried to talk to David many times, hoping he would change and return to his family, but David remained adamant in his choice. During this time, Emily also learned that her relationship with David had been discovered. She feels nervous and insecure, but still wants to continue her relationship with David. Emily understood that Sarah was trying to get David back, and she knew she needed to do something to keep David with her. David and Emily, in secret conversations, begin to ruthlessly plan to eliminate Sarah from their lives. They decided to murder Sarah so they could take over her property and continue their relationship freely. Their plan included staging the scene as a break-in and robbery to distract the police. David and Emily planned in detail and thoroughly. They carefully studied Sarah's schedule and chose the night of June 15, 2019, when Sarah's two children were at their grandparents' house to carry out their plan. They also prepared the necessary tools and supplies to set up the scene perfectly. On the fateful night, David and Emily sneaked into Sarah's bedroom while she was fast asleep. David held Sarah tightly while Emily stabbed her multiple times with a knife. Sarah tried to resist but couldn't escape there finally. Sarah died on the spot due to excessive blood loss. Blood soaked the bed sheets and soaked into the carpet below, creating a horrifying scene. After committing the crime, David and Emily began planning to stage the scene as a break-in and robbery to distract the police. They hid the knife used to commit the crime in a plastic bag and threw it away somewhere far away. David and Emily cleaned up traces at the scene with wet towels and detergent that they had prepared in advance. They took some of Sarah's valuable items, such as jewelry, cash, and expensive electronic devices to create a fake scene of a robbery. These items were scattered throughout the living room and bedroom to increase the persuasiveness of the story of a break-in. They also intentionally messed up the furniture and left some strange shoe prints to make the police believe that a stranger had broken into the house. David and Emily left the scene calmly, believing that their plan was perfect and had not left any clues. However, the truth is that their actions cannot escape the eyes of investigating agencies. The small details they missed and the traces accidentally left behind became important evidence in solving the case. On the morning of June 16, 2019, the family of the two children's grandparents, after not receiving any calls or messages from Sarah all night, began to feel worried. Normally, Sarah always keeps in touch with her children's grandparents every evening to update the situation. Sarah's lack of contact was completely contrary to her habits. They decided to call David, but received no response. David, after waking up that morning, realized that what he and Emily had done could not have been discovered. They had executed the plan so perfectly, he told himself. David decided to create a cover to make the story about the break-in more convincing. At around 8 a.m., David called the police. During the call, he pretended to be panicked and cried, "Hello, police? My wife, Sarah. She was attacked. I just came home and found her lying in bed. Blood everywhere. Please, come now, please. I do not know what to do." David's voice was filled with fear and desperation, causing the police operator to immediately relay the information to the rapid response team immediately after receiving the call. The police quickly arrived at the scene. Investigators and forensic officers began collecting evidence and conducting an autopsy. When the police arrived, David continued to play the role of a miserable husband sitting next to Sarah's body, holding his head, crying, and constantly repeating the phrase, "Why her?" Police officers began examining the scene. They discovered many unusual traces, including unclear fingerprints and various blood stains. Police also noted that the scene appeared to have been staged to look like a break-in and robbery. The police began taking statements from Sarah's neighbors and friends. They discovered that no one had heard loud noises or any signs of a break-in the night before. Some neighbors have even noticed David and Emily behaving suspiciously recently. David, meanwhile, tries to maintain his role. He told police how he discovered Sarah's body, stressing that he had no idea who could do this and that they lived in harmony with their neighbors. However, inconsistencies in David's story began to emerge as the police compared the evidence. During the investigation, police found signs indicating intentional disturbance of the scene. Sarah's valuables were scattered unnaturally, and there were no signs of forced entry or lockpicking. These details raised suspicions that the break-in was staged. Emily's fingerprints were found on the knife used in the crime, and the blood traces did not match the story of the break-in that David told. These evidence made the police suspicious and focused their investigation deeper on David and Emily. Unusual and contradictory signs in David and Emily's testimonies gradually emerged. Police collected text messages and emails between the two people, showing that the plan to murder Sarah was carefully planned in advance. Finally, the police collected enough evidence to charge David and Emily, foiling their cruel plan. David and Emily, under pressure from irrefutable evidence, had to admit their crime. Both are arrested and await trial, ending a cruel plan in a heartbreaking tragedy. After being arrested, David Mitchell and Emily Brown were brought before the court to face charges of murder and staged crime. The trial took place at London's Royal Courts, one of the largest and most prestigious courts in England. Prosecutors have carefully prepared this case with enough evidence and witnesses to incriminate David and Emily. Before the trial began, David and Emily's lawyers tried to find ways to reduce their charges. They argued that both were under psychological pressure and had no prior intention to kill. However, strong evidence from the prosecutor's side made this argument unable to convince the jury. The trial began on December 15, 2019. The 12-member jury was carefully selected to ensure fairness and objectivity. In the first days of the trial, the prosecutor presented important evidence, including Emily's fingerprints on the knife used in the crime. Text messages and emails between David and Emily show that Sarah's murder was planned in advance. Contradictions in David and Emily's testimonies, testimony from witnesses, including Sarah's neighbors and friends, about David and Emily's suspicious behavior. David and Emily were called to the stand to provide their statements. David, in a tense state, tried to argue that he only wanted to scare Sarah and had no intention of killing her. He said things had gone too far out of control, and he couldn't believe that Emily would act so cruelly. Emily, in a state of panic, admitted that she stabbed Sarah, but claimed it was an act of anger and fear. She tried to blame David, saying he forced her into the plan and she couldn't refuse. After several days of trial and review of the evidence, the jury reached its conclusion. On January 20, 2020, David Mitchell and Emily Brown were convicted of murder. David and Emily faced serious consequences for their actions. David was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, while Emily received a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 5 years. In the ruling, the judge emphasized that David and Emily's behavior was extremely cruel and calculated, and that society cannot accept such actions. This verdict not only brings justice for Sarah and her family, but also sends a strong message about protecting human life and rights. This case stunned public opinion and became one of the most notable incidents in the Hampstead Heath area. It represents not only a family tragedy, but also a cautionary tale about the repercussions of betrayal and boundless greed. The community has gained valuable insights into love, honesty, and marital responsibility. Sarah Mitchell will be remembered as a kind and devoted woman, and her story will eternally highlight the importance of love and integrity in life.
Sierra Jin was a young woman who captured everyone's hearts. Her infectious joy and witty humor made her the focal point of everyone's attention. With her lively and cheeky personality, she brought immense delight and cheer to those around her. Even when she aired, she had a unique talent for bringing a smile to her mom's face. As Sierra aged and started high school, she maintained her adventurous spirit. She fearlessly embraced new experiences, one of which was playing volleyball. Whether on the court or off, she displayed a level of comfort and confidence that was truly remarkable. On July 19, 2016, the Juhian family returned from their vacation and began unpacking. Sierra had some exciting plans for the fall semester at the University of Toledo. She had decided to study abroad, and her mother wanted to have a conversation with her about it. However, Sierra, being a very athletic person, had recently purchased a bike, but had not yet had the chance to really use it. So whenever she found time, she was eager to take a ride. Sierra left the house looking cute with her hair up in a ponytail and wearing shorts and a tank top. She mentioned to her mother that she was heading to her boyfriend, Josh's house, which was located 712 miles away from their own. Her mother acknowledged her plans and said she would see her later. At around 10:15 p.m., Josh, Sierra's boyfriend, made a phone call to Sierra's home. He was concerned about Sierra's whereabouts as he had tried to reach her several times, but her phone was going straight to voicemail. When Josh asked Sierra's mom if she was home, she replied that Sierra was not there. Josh informed Sierra's mom that Sierra had left his house a little before 7 p.m., and he hadn't seen or heard from her since then. Sierra's mom immediately sensed something was wrong, as Sierra always answered her phone. Her first instinct was to reach out to her parents, Sierra's grandparents, who lived nearby. However, Sierra's grandma informed her that Sierra was not with them. Worried about Sierra's well-being, her family and Josh embarked on a search mission to find her. Sierra's mother wasted no time and quickly got into her car, determined to scour every possible location. With a sense of urgency, she diligently examined every nook and cranny she came across, including the sides of the road. Meanwhile, Sierra's aunt joined the search effort, accompanied by her husband and son. They, too, suspected that Sierra might have been involved in an accident, possibly hit by a vehicle. As time passed, the worry escalated. The thought of Sierra being injured, perhaps with a broken leg, weighed heavily on their hearts. Despite their tireless efforts and exhaustive search, they were unable to find any sign of Sierra. Sierra's mom arrived home and immediately took to social media to reach out to Sierra's friends, desperately hoping that someone had seen or heard from her. However, to her dismay, there was no response. Hours passed, and there was still no sign of Sierra. Filled with worry, Sierra's mom knew she couldn't waste another minute and decided to call the police. Just an hour later, a concerned neighbor called Sierra's family and informed them that County Road 6 was blocked off. With their hearts racing, Sierra's family rushed out of their home to see what was happening. They were met by a chaotic scene, surrounded by officers who refused to let them pass. The officers couldn't provide any information about Sierra, leaving her mom in a panic. She couldn't help but wonder if the police had found her missing daughter. The small-town police officers, in their efforts to find answers, decided to seek assistance from the FBI. They made a promise to deliver any information they could as soon as possible to Sierra's family. Understandably, the family was unable to sleep and remained wide awake, contemplating the actions they should take the next day. Sierra's mom and aunt refused to wait for answers and took matters into their own hands. Her mom began making calls to hospitals, desperately searching for any signs of an unidentified female. Call after call turned up nothing, leaving them feeling increasingly hopeless. However, a glimmer of hope emerged when a lead came in from Detroit, Michigan. They had heard news of a young woman who bore a striking resemblance to Sierra. This woman had been admitted to a hospital without any identification after managing to escape from a moving vehicle. The injuries she sustained were severe, with numerous broken bones. In an attempt to confirm her identity, a nurse asked Sierra's family to identify marks on her body. Sierra's mom mentioned that she had a scar on her calf and her belly button pierced. The girl in the hospital seemed to match Sierra's description, raising the family's hopes that they had finally found her. However, their hopes were soon crushed when they discovered that the girl in the hospital was not Sierra. It was devastating for the family to learn that it wasn't her, as they had invested so much hope and anticipation in the possibility. Later that morning, the police arrived at Sierra's house to provide them with an update on the events of the previous night. According to the police, one of the officers had discovered a broken cornfield nearby. As he parked his car and approached the area, he noticed signs of a struggle inside. Additionally, he came across a motorcycle track and decided to retreat without disturbing any potential evidence. It was during this retreat that he caught a glimpse of a reflection, which turned out to be Sierra's purple bike. Upon further investigation, the police found several items at the scene. These included a pair of male sunglasses, a pair of female sunglasses, a bloody sock, and a screwdriver. Based on these findings, the police explained that they believed Sierra had been abducted from that particular location. During the investigation, detectives thoroughly questioned Sierra's friends and family to gather information about her boyfriend, Josh. Through their inquiries, the detectives discovered that Sierra and Josh had been close friends since they were 7. Their friendship blossomed into a romantic relationship during their first year of high school, and they became known as a vibrant and fun-loving couple. One of their shared passions was skiing, and they often hit the slopes together. As high school came to an end, Sierra attended the University of Toledo, while Josh enrolled at Bowling Green. Despite the distance, their commitment remained strong, and they frequently discussed the prospect of marriage. However, Sierra expressed her desire to prioritize her education before settling down, highlighting her dedication to her studies. Despite this, their relationship remained serious, and they navigated the challenges of a long-distance relationship. Detectives investigating the case discovered that Sierra had visited Josh's house in the early afternoon on July 19th. According to the information gathered, Sierra decided to leave Josh's house and return home at approximately 6:30 p.m. Concerned for her safety, Josh joined Sierra on her journey back to her residence, riding alongside her on his motorcycle. After traveling a few miles, Sierra insisted that Josh turn around and go back. She expressed her independence and desire to ride her bike home alone. Reluctantly, Josh agreed, and the two of them parted ways. Josh headed back on his motorcycle, while Sierra continued her journey on her bike. During the investigation, detectives came across motorcycle tracks in the cornstalks near Sierra's bike. This finding raised the question of whether these tracks belonged to Josh's motorcycle. The detectives could not ignore this potential connection and began exploring further to determine if there was any evidence linking Josh to the scene. Detectives quickly set up a command post to gather any relevant clues about Sierra's disappearance. It didn't take long for a promising lead to come in. A resident had come forward and explained that on July 14th, as he was driving on the roads, he noticed a motorcycle helmet lying on the side of the road. Intrigued, he told his son to jump out and grab the helmet, putting it in their truck. However, after hearing what was happening with Sierra, he decided to inspect the helmet more closely. To his surprise, he noticed red stains on it, which he believed to be blood. The helmet was found in the general area where Sierra's bike was in the cornfield. The detectives approached Josh to inquire about the whereabouts of his motorcycle helmet. To their relief, Josh was able to produce the helmet, confirming he had it with him. Furthermore, the detectives verified that Josh had returned home after interviewing his parents. This alibi ruled him out as a suspect in the case. Despite being visibly shaken up, Josh was never considered by Sierra's family as someone responsible for her disappearance. Detectives were determined to identify the owner of the blood-stained motorcycle helmet found on the side of the road. Recognizing the importance of DNA evidence, they decided to send it to the crime lab for testing. With anticipation building, the detectives patiently awaited the results, hoping it would provide a breakthrough in their investigation. Meanwhile, the news of Sierra's disappearance had spread throughout the town, and the community rallied together to search for her. Concerned citizens joined forces and organized search parties, combing through every possible area in the hopes of finding any clue that could lead to her whereabouts. The townspeople felt a deep sense of unity as they worked tirelessly to bring Sierra home safely. In addition to the search efforts, the community organized a candlelight vigil for Sierra at the local high school. The atmosphere was filled with grief, hope, and determination. Hundreds of people gathered, holding flickering candles, sending their thoughts and prayers for Sierra's safe return. 2 days into the investigation into Sierra's disappearance, the police received a tip regarding a van that was seen speeding through the area. There were speculations that Sierra might have been taken in that van and possibly subjected to sex trafficking. The tipster provided the police with a license plate number associated with the vehicle. Following the lead, the police conducted an interview with the van's owner. It was discovered that the reason for the van speeding through the area was not related to Sierra's abduction. The individual explained that another vehicle had abruptly approached from behind, potentially a family member searching for Sierra, which startled him. In response, he instinctively sped off, creating a misperception of his involvement in the case. 48 hours into the investigation, no leads emerged in the search for Sierra. Her family is finding it increasingly difficult to maintain hope as each day passes. The chances of finding her alive grow slimmer and slimmer with every passing day. Despite their best efforts to remain optimistic, the grim reality of the situation is becoming harder to ignore. The police conducted a door-to-door search in their efforts to find Sierra. Eventually, their investigation led them to a farm not too far from where Sierra's bike was discovered. This particular property spanned an acre and consisted of several structures, including a small house, a trailer, and a large barn. The owner of this property was identified as James Worley. Upon arriving at the farm, the police initiated a conversation with James Worley. They questioned him about the day Sierra went missing, hoping to gather any information he might have regarding her disappearance. To their surprise, James stated that he had been out on his motorcycle on the day in question. However, his bike had broken down, leading him to lose a few items along the way, including a screwdriver and his helmet. This revelation left the detectives stunned, as these were the same items that had been found at the scene of Sierra's abduction. James inadvertently placing himself at the initial scene of the crime raised significant red flags for the detectives. The connection between James and the missing Sierra became increasingly suspicious, and the police were determined to delve deeper into their investigation. As the detectives questioned James Worley, something caught their attention: scratches on his face. It was evident that he had been involved in a struggle. This discovery only heightened their suspicions about him and raised more questions. The detectives wondered if these scratches were the result of a confrontation with Sierra. The detectives returned to the police station after questioning James Worley regarding Sierra's disappearance. They wanted to conduct a background check on him, hoping to uncover relevant information. As they delved into his past, what they discovered sent chills down their spines. James Worley had a dark criminal history, which included a previous attempt to abduct a young lady 26 years earlier on July 4, 1989. On July 4, 1989, Robin Gardner, age 26, was preparing to attend a neighborhood picnic. Her mother was busy making potato salad and getting everything ready for the event. Robin thought it would be a good idea to go for a bike ride before heading to the picnic. Unfortunately, Robin did not have any water with her, and the heat was becoming unbearable. Robin contemplated turning around and heading back home to quench her thirst. Just as Robin was about to make that decision, she heard the sound of a car approaching from behind. Robin assumed that once the vehicle passed her, she would make her way back home. However, before Robin could react, there was an impact as the car collided with her bike. As the car collided with Robin on her bike, the impact sent her flying into a nearby ditch. Stunned and disoriented, Robin could hear the driver of the vehicle stopping and getting out. Concerned, the driver approached Robin and asked if she was okay, trying to assess the situation. However, the turn of events took a terrifying twist. Suddenly, the person who had hit Robin with the car revealed sinister intentions. Without warning, he struck her forcefully in the back of the head. Robin struggled to comprehend what was happening as the assailant placed a screwdriver to her throat, threatening her life. In a menacing tone, the man ordered Robin to get up and get into his car immediately. The man, with a screwdriver pressed against Robin's neck, forcefully coerced her into his car. Once inside, he attempted to handcuff her. Despite managing to connect one cuff around her wrist, Robin resisted fiercely, preventing him from securing the other. She screamed at the top of her lungs for help, but the desolate cornfields offered no solace, as there was no one around to hear her cries. Robin's relentless struggle against the man left her on the verge of losing consciousness multiple times, yet she continued to fight. Suddenly, amidst the eerie silence, she heard a faint sound in the distance. As she strained her eyes, she spotted a motorcycle approaching the man's car. Realizing that this could be her only chance for escape, Robin began waving her arms frantically to catch the attention of the motorcycle rider. Thankfully, the rider noticed Robin's distress and promptly brought the motorcycle to a halt. In a desperate plea for help, Robin explained that the man was attempting to end her life. Without hesitation, she seized the opportunity and swiftly climbed onto the back of the motorcycle, leaving her captor and the car behind. The man on the motorcycle drove Robin home, where she collapsed. Robin's mother called the police and an ambulance. As Robin was rushed to the hospital for medical attention, the motorcyclist, determined to assist the authorities, led the police back to the scene of the incident. To their surprise, they discovered James Worley still present with his car. James, upon being questioned, cooperated fully and provided identification to confirm his identity. However, James Worley's account of the events differed significantly from what was initially assumed. He vehemently denied any intention of abducting Robin. According to his version of the story, Robin had been riding her bike erratically, swerving into the road, making it impossible for him to avoid colliding with her. James claimed that Robin was in a state of hysteria following the accident, which led him to restrain her with handcuffs, not to harm her, but to secure her to the steering wheel of his truck while he sought help. He insisted that his actions were driven by a genuine concern for Robin's well-being. James Worley was arrested in 1989 after attempting to take Robin. He was found guilty of abduction and subsequently sent to the state prison in Mansfield, Ohio. Worley received a sentence of 6 to 10 years. However, due to exhibiting good behavior, he was released 3 years later. When Robin learned that the man who had tried to kidnap her was released, she was terrified. The fear of James potentially acting again weighed heavily on her mind. Armed with information about James Worley's criminal past, the police decided to pay a visit to his residence. Equipped with a search warrant, they arrived at his home and began their investigation. Upon searching the house, which James shared with his mother, nothing seemed to be out of the ordinary. However, their attention then turned to James' expansive backyard. As they combed through the vast outdoor space, the officers stumbled upon a barn tucked away in the corner. Curiosity piqued. They cautiously approached the structure. Inside, they discovered neatly stacked bales of hay. The police carefully inspected the barn, meticulously searching for any evidence that could potentially tie James to Sarah's disappearance. Every nook and cranny was thoroughly examined, and each bale of hay was scrutinized in the hopes of uncovering any hidden items or clues. During the detectives' meticulous removal of the bales of hay from James Worley's barn, their eyes landed on a small green crate hidden in the corner. They cautiously approached and opened the box, revealing its contents. Inside, they discovered bags of underwear, stockings, and tube tops neatly labeled and sealed in plastic Ziploc bags. As they sifted through the various items, their eyes widened at the sight of a pair of purple panties stained with what appeared to be blood. The detectives couldn't help but feel a sense of dread as they contemplated what other unsettling discoveries lay ahead in their search of James Worley's barn. The detectives immediately noticed a piece of plywood lying on the ground. Recognizing its potential significance, they carefully removed the plywood, revealing a small cubic feet freezer buried in the barn. They opened the freezer only to be greeted by a foul odor. It was a strong chemical smell reminiscent of bleach, which further raised their suspicions. As the detectives continued their investigation, they discovered other disturbing elements partially concealed by hay bales. Among them was an air mattress bearing unsightly stains that hinted at a gruesome past. The presence of zip ties, duct tape, handcuffs, and keys further fueled their concerns. These items were all too familiar, consistent with those used in abductions and other nefarious activities. The detectives made the decision to submit everything taken from the property for DNA testing. In his defense, Worley attempted to explain the items as part of a porn business he claimed to be planning. However, the weight of the evidence against him proved too substantial to dismiss. The combination of the disturbing discoveries at the crime scene, as well as the incriminating nature of the collected items, led to Jamie's arrest for the murder of Sierra. Sierra Pham was left in utter shock upon discovering that the person who had abducted her was someone living miles away from her home. This revelation left her with a million questions swirling in her mind, but the most pressing one was undoubtedly, where was she? The detectives embarked on a thorough investigation of James' property, leaving no stone unturned. They meticulously combed through every inch of the property, ensuring a comprehensive search. To aid in their search, cadaver dogs were brought in to assist in the detection of any potential remains. During the investigation, the detectives came across a pond on the property. Recognizing its potential significance, they carefully drained the pond to uncover any evidence that may have been hidden beneath the water's surface. Not stopping there, the detectives also inspected the insulation in the front of the attic. As the investigation progressed, the detectives extended their search to the neighboring properties. Recognizing the possibility of evidence being dispersed beyond James's property, they diligently pursued leads in all directions. A call came in from a farmer as he was walking in his vast field. He noticed a peculiar area of corn that seemed to be matted down. He decided to investigate further, and as he approached the spot, he saw a mound of dirt nearby. Instantly, his mind raced, thinking it could be a potential grave. The farmer's concerns were heightened due to recent events surrounding the search for Sierra. With this in mind, he wasted no time and dialed the police, sharing his suspicions and the exact location. Responding promptly to the farmer's distress call, the police arrived. Their trained eyes caught sight of a fresh pile of dirt, further fueling their suspicions that it could indeed be a grave. Taking the situation seriously, they swiftly began processing the area, careful not to disturb any potential evidence. Every inch of the scene was examined as the officers hoped to uncover clues regarding the whereabouts of Sierra. However, despite their thorough efforts, their search yielded no results. The detectives proceeded to search the adjoining farms for Sierra. They utilized drones and helicopters to cover a larger area and increase their chances of locating her. During their search, they came across a mound of dirt with freshly matted corn. Their trained dogs indicated the scent of decomposition, suggesting a potential crime scene. As the crime scene investigators dug, the police made a grim discovery. They found human remains. Based on the evidence, it was believed to be the body of Sierra. Tragically, her hands were bound behind her back, and her feet were tied to the handcuffs. Further examination revealed that an object was lodged in her mouth, restricting her airway. It was determined that she couldn't breathe, ultimately leading to her cause of death. Later that night, the Sierra family received the devastating call they had been dreading. The police had discovered Sierra's lifeless body. This news delivered a heavy blow, and it was met with an outpouring of grief as everyone in the family broke down in tears. The weight of the moment was overwhelming, and the sorrow felt by each family member was palpable. 1 month after the tragic abduction and murder of Sierra, James Worley was indicted on 19 counts, including kidnapping and aggravated murder. 2 years later, Worley stood trial for his alleged crimes. Despite the strong evidence against him, he maintained his innocence to all charges. Over 8 dramatic days, the state unfolded a chilling narrative that captivated both the jury and the audience. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before reaching a decision in the case of James Worley. After thorough examination of the presented evidence, Worley was found guilty on all charges connected to Sierra's murder. The gravity of the crime resulted in a death sentence for James Worley.
In the peaceful suburbs of Rochester, New York, Vanessa Robertson, 46, lived a life that embodied the American dream. As a devoted mother of 3 and a respected filing clerk at the renowned photography firm Kodak, Vanessa's existence was deeply woven into her community's fabric. Residing in a 4-bedroom house on a street filled with similar middle-class dreams, she was a beacon of stability and warmth. Vanessa's academic path concluded with a degree from the University of Rochester, known for its research and academic excellence. It was here that she not only refined her professional abilities, but also met her husband, Andrew, marking the start of their shared future. The world outside her home was in the throes of change. The news cycle of March 2010 was dominated by the Affordable Care Act debates, and the tremors of the Great Recession were still palpable in households and boardrooms alike. Kodak, once a titan of industry, was grappling with the digital revolution. Its struggles an echo of the wider economic uncertainty. Despite the tumult, Vanessa's focus remained on the immediate joys and challenges of life. Her eldest was preparing for college. Her middle child was navigating the throes of adolescence, and her youngest was on the cusp of celebrating her 10th birthday. Vanessa poured her dreams into her children's futures, envisioning for them a world of possibilities that perhaps she had never dared to imagine for herself. Colleagues at Kodak described Vanessa as diligent and personable, a woman who brought order to the chaos of filing with a smile that seldom waned. Friends spoke of her as the linchpin of her family, a woman whose laughter could light up a room and whose presence was a comfort in uncertain times. In the days before her untimely death, Vanessa was absorbed in the minutiae of life, from planning her daughter's birthday party to navigating the everyday demands of her job. Unbeknownst to her, the threads of her carefully woven tapestry were about to unravel in the most tragic of circumstances. On the cold morning of March 15, 2010, as Rochester residents awoke to the remnants of a winter chill, a grim discovery was made in a quiet neighborhood. At 7:30 a.m., under a slate-gray sky, the smoldering remains of what was once a family home on Maplewood Drive were found. The house belonging to Vanessa Robertson, a 46-year-old Kodak employee, had been reduced to a blackened shell. The distressing find was made by Diana Hastings, a neighbor and longtime resident of the area. Diana, who had set out to collect her morning newspaper, was met with an acrid smell and a scene of destruction that halted her in her tracks. The Robertson residence, known for its well-kept lawn and the laughter of children, lay in ruins before her. With shaking hands, she reached for her cell phone and dialed 911, her voice quivering as she reported the catastrophe to the authorities. As news of the fire began to spread, local media outlets picked up the story, interrupting regular programming with breaking news alerts. The tragedy quickly became the talk of the town, overshadowing the usual buzz about the upcoming St. Patrick's Day celebrations and the latest reports on the healthcare bill making its way through Congress. Firefighters who had battled the blaze through the night were still on the scene, dousing the last of the smoldering embers when police arrived. It was amid this backdrop of charred timbers and the stark reality of a life interrupted that Vanessa's body was discovered. Positioned in what was once the living room, her remains bore the silent testimony to the inferno's deadly force. The community, just beginning its day, was now united in shock and mourning. The Robertsons, active members of their local church and participants in neighborhood gatherings, were well regarded, and Vanessa's death resonated with a poignant intensity. As the reality of the tragedy set in, the question on everyone's lips was a whispered, "How could this happen?" The Rochester Police Department was swift to respond to the call from Maplewood Drive on that bleak March morning. The first officers arrived within minutes, their squad cars breaking the early silence. The scene they encountered was one of devastation. A family home, once a symbol of suburban stability, now lay in ruins, a stark contrast to the neighboring houses untouched by the tragedy. Detectives Matthew Harmon and Liana Grace, veterans of the force, were tasked with leading the investigation. They approached the scene with a practiced calm, but the gravity of the situation was not lost on them. The air was still tinged with the scent of smoke, and the debris from the fire crunched underfoot as they surveyed the damage. The crime scene was a harrowing tableau. Amidst the blackened remains of the Robertson home, Vanessa's body was found. There were no overt signs of violence, but the circumstances were suspicious enough to consider foul play. The detectives, well versed in the grim language of crime scenes, noted the absence of personal effects that might have survived the fire. raising questions about the intensity and origin of the flames. As they cordoned off the area, Harmon and Grace directed the forensics team to begin their meticulous work. Using the latest in crime scene technology, including thermal imaging cameras to detect any residual heat sources and accelerant sniffing dogs to trace the path of the fire, the team combed through the ashes. Every fragment was potential evidence, every clue a possible key to unraveling the mystery of Vanessa Robertson's death. The local media, already abuzz with the healthcare debates in the international headlines of Chile's recent earthquake, now had a domestic tragedy to report. Camera crews and reporters gathered at the perimeter, their lenses and microphones capturing the somber investigation for an audience grappling with the shock of the event. As the day wore on, the community awaited answers. The Rochester Police Department was under pressure to piece together the puzzle of the house fire that had claimed one of their own. For detectives Harmon and Grace, the task was clear: to bring clarity and justice to a scene shrouded in ash and ambiguity. The investigation into Vanessa Robertson's death led detectives to the doorstep of the first suspect, Elizur Jones. At 75, Jones was a fixture in the community, known for his stern demeanor and his sprawling farmland that bordered the Robertson property. A property dispute between Jones and the Robertsons had been simmering for months, a fact that did not escape the attention of the Rochester Police Department. Elizur Jones had lived through the ebbs and flows of rural life and had seen his share of conflict over land and legacy. His farm, a once thriving enterprise, had felt the sting of the Great Recession, and the dispute with the Robertsons over a contested piece of borderland had added to the weight of his troubles. Despite his advancing years, Jones harbored dreams of leaving a prosperous and unencumbered farm to his heirs, a dream that seemed to be slipping through his fingers. When detectives Harmon and Grace arrived to question him, they found Jones in his barn tending to his equipment, seemingly unfazed by the police presence. His response to their inquiries was laced with indignation. He vehemently denied any involvement in the fire, his voice rising above the clatter of the news reports from a radio perched on a nearby workbench, the voice of a local anchor discussing the latest unemployment figures. A stark reminder of the tense economic climate. Jones's interrogation was conducted with the precision of seasoned investigators. They probed for inconsistencies in his alibi, scrutinized his reactions, and searched for any flicker of guilt that might betray complicity. Jones, for his part, remained obstinate. His replies, a mixture of defiance and exasperation. The detectives left the farm with more questions than answers. The Rochester community, still reeling from the news of the fire and the death of one of their own, watched with a mix of curiosity and concern. The investigation was unfolding under the watchful eye of a town unaccustomed to such tragedies, and the spotlight on Elizur Jones was unrelenting. As the investigation into the tragic fire progressed, detectives turned their focus to Kristen Valmont, a 35-year-old colleague of Vanessa Robertson at Kodak. Valmont, known for her ambitious streak within the company, had reportedly clashed with Vanessa on multiple occasions, leading to a palpable tension in the office that did not go unnoticed by their co-workers. Kristen had joined Kodak during a time of significant transition as the company struggled to adapt to the digital age in the wake of declining film sales, a struggle mirrored in news reports and business analysis of the time. Her aspirations to ascend the corporate ladder were well known, and she envisioned herself as a transformative figure within the company, capable of steering Kodak back to its former glory. Detectives Harmon and Grace approached the interrogation with a methodical strategy, aware of the delicate nature of office politics and the undercurrent of rivalry that could potentially motivate a crime. They questioned Kristen at the police station, where she presented herself with a composed exterior that belied the seriousness of the situation. Throughout the questioning, Kristen maintained her calm, her responses measured and deliberate. She acknowledged her professional disagreements with Vanessa, but firmly denied any personal animosity that would lead to such a heinous act. Her demeanor was cool and collected, even as the detectives pressed her on the details of her whereabouts on the night of the fire. The Rochester community, still processing the loss of one of their own, followed the case with growing interest. Local media outlets, in between updates on the latest iPad release and the unfolding healthcare debate in Washington, kept the public informed of every development. The scrutiny on Kristen Valmont intensified as the police continued to piece together the events leading up to the fire. her professional dreams and ambitions now cast in the shadow of a criminal investigation. On March 20th, 2010, as the city of Rochester braced against a persistent spring drizzle, the investigation into Vanessa Robertson's death took a significant turn. Detectives Harmon and Grace received a report that breathed new life into the case. A series of anonymous threatening emails sent to Vanessa in the weeks prior to her death had been uncovered by the department's cybercrime unit. The emails, traced back to an untraceable source, were laced with vitriol and menacing undertones, digital missives that painted a picture of someone with a vendetta against Vanessa. The discovery of these emails shifted the narrative of the investigation, suggesting that the fire might have been a premeditated act of violence rather than a tragic accident. The Rochester Police Department's response was swift and methodical. The forensics team, equipped with advanced software used to analyze digital communications, worked tirelessly to extract any metadata that might lead to the identification of the sender. Meanwhile, detectives revisited the charred remnants of the Robertson home, searching for any physical evidence that might corroborate the digital threats. The news of the threatening emails rippled through the community, which was already grappling with the economic anxieties of the time, the whispers of Kodak's financial troubles, and the broader implications of the ongoing recession. The case with its new twist was now the subject of fervent discussion on local radio shows and in the comment sections of online news articles as residents of Rochester sought to make sense of the unfolding drama. As the investigation pressed forward, the police remained tight-lipped about their findings, though it was clear that the discovery of the emails had provided a new avenue of inquiry. The Rochester community watched on, hopeful that this latest development would bring them closer to understanding the events that led to the tragic loss of Vanessa Robertson. The Rochester Police Department's search for Vanessa Robertson's killer led them to a third individual of interest, George Stokanovich, a 45-year-old ex-convict whose presence had been noted in the vicinity of the Robertson residence in the days preceding the fire. Stokanovich, with a past marred by criminal activity, had been attempting to reintegrate into society, holding on to the dream of leaving his checkered history behind him. Stakanovich's occupation since his release from prison had been sporadic, with him taking on various odd jobs around Rochester. His transient nature and proximity to the Robertsons' home during the critical time frame made him a figure of suspicion in the eyes of the detectives. Stukanovich's aspirations for a normal life, free from the stigma of his past, were now overshadowed by the investigation. Detectives Harmon and Grace approached the interrogation with the intent to peel back the layers of Stukanovich's recent activities. The questioning took place against the backdrop of a city still in shock, with local news outlets like WRCV and the Democrat and Chronicle closely following the case, providing the public with a steady stream of updates amidst their coverage of the healthcare bill's progress and the local impact of the economic downturn. During the interrogation, Stukanovich's demeanor oscillated between anxious and defensive. He acknowledged his presence in the area, but claimed it was innocuous, related to a potential job opportunity. His responses were tinged with the frustration of a man familiar with being on the wrong side of the law, yet he maintained his innocence regarding the fire and Vanessa's death. The Rochester community, already on edge from the recession's impact on local industry giants like Xerox and Bosch and Lohm, watched as the police delved deeper into Stukanovich's alibi. With each passing day, the pressure mounted to solve the case and provide answers to a family and a city in mourning. The relentless pursuit of truth by the Rochester Police Department culminated in a revelation that would shake the foundations of the Robertson family and the community at large. Andrew Robertson, a 48-year-old engineer at Kodak and the bereaved husband of Vanessa Robertson, emerged as the prime suspect in the case. The economic strain of the Great Recession had left Andrew facing the prospect of unemployment as Kodak, once a bastion of innovation and prosperity, was now grappling with the seismic shifts of the digital age. Andrew, described by colleagues as a pragmatic man deeply invested in his work, had been harboring a secret that would unravel his seemingly stable life. With Kodak's layoffs making headlines and the financial security of families across Rochester hanging in the balance, Andrew had been silently drowning in desperation. His dream of maintaining the comfortable life he had built for his family was slipping away. And in a moment of profound misjudgment, he set his home ablaze, intending to claim the insurance without his wife's knowledge. On that fateful March evening, as the city contended with the chill of early spring and the local news reported on the burgeoning Tea Party movement's rallies, Andrew had not realized that Vanessa would be home. The fire, intended as a desperate escape from financial ruin, instead became an act of unintended but irreversible devastation. Detectives Harmon and Grace, after painstakingly reconstructing the sequence of events and analyzing the evidence, confronted Andrew with their findings. His facade of stoicism crumbled as the implications of his actions became clear. The man who had sought to protect his family from economic hardship had instead torn it asunder. As the news of Andrew's arrest spread through Rochester, the city was left to grapple with the dichotomy of a man who was both a respected engineer and now a convicted murderer. The case, a stark reminder of the pressures that can fracture even the most ordinary lives, became a touchstone for discussions on the far-reaching effects of the recession. On the evening of March 25, 2010, under the dimming light of an overcast sky, the Rochester Police Department made a decisive move in the case of Vanessa Robertson. Andrew Robertson, a 48-year-old Kodak engineer and the unsuspecting husband-turned-suspect, was taken into custody. The city, still grappling with the economic anxieties of the recession and the uncertainty surrounding local stalwarts like Kodak, now witnessed the dramatic turn in a case that had captivated the community. The arrest occurred at Andrew's temporary residence, a modest hotel room he had retreated to amidst the investigation. Detectives Harmon and Grace, armed with evidence of his ill-fated attempt to escape financial ruin, approached with a warrant. The scene was far removed from the technological advancements and corporate strategies discussed in Kodak's boardrooms, or the latest healthcare debates that dominated the airwaves. Andrew's reaction to the arrest was a complex tapestry of emotions. Surprise registered on his face, quickly followed by the dawning realization of the consequences of his actions. The man who had engineered a desperate plan to secure his family's future through an act of arson was now confronted with the irreversible outcome of his wife's death. As the news of the arrest broke, it rippled through Rochester's local media, with reporters from stations like WAM and WGC providing live updates, breaking into scheduled programming that included March Madness basketball and the latest episodes of popular TV shows. The community, which had been following the case with bated breath, now grappled with the reality that the tragedy was rooted not in random violence, but in a domestic spiral gone horribly wrong. The Robertson children, already facing the loss of their mother, were dealt another blow with the arrest of their father. The family's grief was compounded by a sense of betrayal. Their private turmoil laid bare for all to see. As the details of the case unfolded, the city of Rochester bore witness to a family's heartbreak in the downfall of a man who had succumbed to the darkest reaches of despair. The trial of Andrew Robertson commenced amidst the climate of heightened public interest. The courtroom, a stage for the unfolding drama, was presided over by a sea of legal professionals, media personnel, and a community seeking closure. Helen Pierce, the prosecutor, stood as a figure of relentless justice. At 52, her reputation was that of a formidable presence in the courtroom, having navigated numerous high-profile cases with a blend of legal acumen and unwavering resolve. On the opposing side, defense attorney Sheila Keller, 47, was known for her persuasive oratory and empathetic approach to the law. Keller's task was to humanize Andrew, to cast him as a tragic figure overwhelmed by the economic pressures that had seized the nation, much like the recession's grip on Rochester's own corporate giants, Kodak and Xerox. As Pierce laid out the prosecution's case, she weaved a narrative of premeditated arson, a desperate act by a man on the brink. She referenced the digital evidence, the financial strains, and the insurance policy that pointed to a motive rooted in economic despair. The courtroom, filled with the of whispered speculation, was a microcosm of the wider world where news cycles were dominated by stories of financial ruin and corporate bailouts. Keller's defense painted a different picture, that of a man who had made a catastrophic error in judgment without malice or intent to harm his beloved wife. She highlighted Andrew's role as a provider, a man caught in an economic maelstrom that had left him floundering. Throughout the proceedings, the emotional toll on Vanessa's family was palpable. They sat a portrait of sorrow. Their presence is silent testimony to the life that had been so abruptly taken from them. The trial, unfolding under the scrutiny of local media outlets like the Democrat and Chronicle, became a somber reflection of the times. A narrative of personal tragedy against the backdrop of national economic hardship. The somber atmosphere of the Rochester courthouse was palpable as the jury returned with their verdict for Andrew Robertson. After hours of deliberation, which seemed to echo the broader societal deliberations on justice and economic hardship, the jury found Andrew guilty of manslaughter and arson. The decision reverberated through the courtroom where the tension had been as thick as the March fog blanketing the city skyline. Prosecutor Helen Pierce, her career marked by a string of successful convictions, stood satisfied with the outcome, believing justice had been served. The defense attorney, Sheila Keller, known for her eloquent defenses and a personal touch that often resonated with juries, was visibly subdued, his expression reflecting the weight of the verdict. The sentencing phase brought a heavy penalty as the judge, attuned to the severity of the crime and its repercussions, imposed a lengthy prison sentence. The gravity of the sentence sought to reflect not only the loss of Vanessa's life, but also the betrayal of trust and the breach of safety within the sanctity of one's home. Some in the community felt the punishment was just considering the deliberate act of setting the fire, while others debated the role of Andrew's desperate financial circumstances, drawing parallels to the leniency shown in some corporate bailouts of the era. The impact of the sentence on Vanessa's family was complex. While some felt a measure of relief, others questioned whether any sentence could adequately address the void left behind. Friends and family, their emotions raw, were divided on whether justice had truly been served. Local news outlets, which have been following the case with the same intensity as the national coverage of the iPad's release earlier that month, now reported on the community's reaction. The sentencing was more than a legal conclusion. It was a moment of reflection on the personal cost of the economic downturn that had swept through Rochester and the nation. In the wake of the trial that had gripped Rochester, life slowly began to move forward. The family of Vanessa Robertson, now navigating a world without her, sought solace in the support of the community and in each other. The children bereft of both parents faced the daunting task of rebuilding their lives. Their resilience, a testament to their mother's enduring influence. Detectives Harmon and Grace, who had become fixtures in the media narrative surrounding the case, returned to their duties. The experience, however, left an indelible mark on their careers. They continue to serve with a renewed understanding of the complexities of human behavior and the unforeseen impacts of financial despair. The suspects who had been drawn into the case, Elizur Jones, Kristen Valmont, and George Stukanovich, sought to reclaim their reputations and move past the cloud of suspicion that had briefly overshadowed their lives. Jones returned to his farm, Valmont to her ambitions at Kodak, and Stukanovich to his quest for redemption. Rochester itself, a city that had witnessed the rise and fall of industrial giants, the ebb and flow of economic fortunes, and now the tragic end of one of its own, continued to evolve. The case had become a part of its history, a story recounted in the pages of the Democrat and Chronicle and discussed in the quiet corners of local establishments. As the memory of the trial faded from the headlines, overtaken by coverage of the 2010 midterm elections or the latest advancements from companies like Apple, the community did not forget the lessons learned. The tragedy of Vanessa Robertson served as a stark reminder of the human cost of economic hardship. A story that struck a chord with a city well acquainted with transformation. Life following the trial was more than just moving forward. It was about remembrance and discovering purpose in the wake of loss. For everyone affected by the case, the path ahead was marked by introspection, strength, and a desire for a future free of such sorrow. Thanks for diving into another mystery with us. If you enjoyed unraveling the clues and chasing the truth, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give us a thumbs up. Your support helps us bring you more thrilling cases and deep dives into the unknown.